Hey everyone, Amiya here from Resonance Astrology. I'm joined today by Tegan West, and we're going to be talking about our dear lovely planet Pluto today, which I think is a planet a lot of people usually scared about. Tegan is the best person I could have chosen for this. You're going to see why in a minute. And this is really, in a way, this is actually kind of we're closing off the series, at least from the planetary perspective, because Pluto is the last planet. I mean, science-wise, maybe it even isn't a planet in our solar system. So Pluto is a bit of an odd one out planet, but I think everyone that knows astrology and has experienced Pluto transits knows they're very, very real and very powerful. It would, yeah, it would not work out to cast that planet away. And yeah, and so I hope we're gonna do this justice. Maybe we're also gonna bring in Chiron and some of the asteroids after this, just FYI. But from a planetary perspective, this is the last planet we're gonna talk about, and I'm super, super excited to do this with Tegan, and I'm gonna let her introduce herself now.
Thank you. I love doing the most controversial. Yeah, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this, just to muse together. Yeah, so I am Tegan or T West, and I'm on Seneca land in so-called upstate New York. And yeah, I'm an astrologer and a ritualist and a drum maker. And yeah, honestly, these days just really like a lover of creation. So that's how I'll introduce myself here. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
I've had the pleasure of you making a rattle for me not too long ago. And it's I can just shout it out, like it's if you want a drum or a rattle, like
Aw,
go to her.
thank
Because
you.
that's your other like that's the ritual altar. Am I saying it
Yeah,
correctly? Yes.
yes, alter ritual arts. Yeah, it's kind
Altar
of my
rituals,
little
yeah.
like art. Yeah, my creative practice for sure. Yeah. Ritual, creative. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it has such a, I mean, first of all, both of us are Scorpio risings here, so I think we're definitely going to bring the depth. But it's I think there was an immediate trust I had with you just, doing that process in a way where I'm like, "Oh yeah, she knows what she's
Oh,
doing."
yeah. Thank you.
Yes. So I'm going to ask you what I ask all of my guests before we start the episode about what are their planetary credentials, because I know Pluto is a pretty powerful planet in your charts.
Yeah. My planetary credentials. I mean, that's we were joking about it a bit before, but I do love Pluto and it is very controversial. Pluto is also aspecting a lot of personal planets for me, so I think I've had to really learn over time. But yeah, Pluto's like within 3 degrees of my ascendant. So a good old-fashioned conjunction on the ascendant. Also in direct square with my moon and Venus. And sextiling my Mercury and trine my Saturn. So I feel like I joked about this, but I really do feel I have like the whole Hades Persephone myth going on, like the mom thing with the moon and yeah, like Saturn as Hades' father in this case, it just feels like the relationships with Hermes, like it's all evident in the chart, and I do see the way that that's played out in my life, fortunately or unfortunately. Lots of Pluto in me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I love that. Before I was like, yeah, that's a rare opinion that to love Pluto.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, I think all the outer planets have very much a wild card energy with them, and they do, I think Pluto is especially a planet that whatever it touches, like it can make things a lot bigger in proportion or a lot smaller than they are. And we're going to talk more about that down the line. But it is an extremely powerful little planet in the sky that, again, it's very slow moving. Like it takes Pluto a long time to go through a zodiac sign. Well, some more, some less. But it is like when there is a transit with Pluto, it's like it's undeniable. It's very
Yes.
undeniable that it is here and that it's powerful and that it's very transformative. And yeah, this is what we're going to talk about.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah, and I feel that like especially for folks out there that might have strong Pluto aspects, it's like it feels very polarizing, like a love-hate relationship. And I think that I've been on the side of it where Pluto has just kind of laid me out, especially when I was younger. And so it's like whether I like it or not, I had to make peace
Mm.
with this beast, you know? And now that I understand like the medicine to it, that feels very like homeopathic. It's like, great, now I can work with it now that I understand its nature. So I'm excited to muse about it and hopefully convince others that he's not so bad. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's such a good point because I spend well, sometimes less, sometimes more, but my fair share amount I've definitely spent on Astro Reddit, and one of the biggest questions is like, am I cursed? Am I doomed? And so often it's involved with Pluto or Saturn.
Yeah.
And yeah, by no surprise. And I think one of the biggest things that I really like to do, or that I want to help people do when it comes to astrology and their charts, is for them to, well, to take their fear away
Yeah.
of the planets and the transits, and which is kind of really why this series was even born in the first place, because I was like, well, let's actually meet the planets and make you aware that you can have a relationship to them, because as soon as you start forming a relationship to the planets, they get a lot less scary. Like, definitely, I still have respect for Pluto. I think you should have respect for Pluto. But it's also, Pluto has this very shadowy quality to it,
Yeah. Yeah.
which we can also talk about more in the myth part. But it's, the thing with shadows is, once you realize they're shadows, it's a lot less scary.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think I love the connection to this piece about like making big things small and small things big. Like it is this kind of subjective experience of how much we're actually feeding the fear by putting things in exile. And that's really the wisdom I feel from Pluto is like this is up to you in your relationship with how big or small you're making these forces, you know. It's actually very agentic in a certain type of way. Like I feel an invitation to like yeah, come into a right-sized relationship with our
Hmm.
life through Pluto, you know, which is hard. It's hard to do. It's very psychological. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is very psychological indeed.
Yes.
Yes, yes. I think in the beginning, well, what we do with all planets is, and it's a bit different with the outer planets, but with the inner planets, we always talked about dignities. So it's, it's like, where's the planet in domicile, which is the home sign, and where is it in its fall, where it's in its exaltation. And we're both, we use more like ancient traditional astrology, so we don't specifically prescribe Pluto as the ruler of Scorpio, even though we can talk a bit about how I can totally see why that makes sense. I can totally see why people did start associate Scorpio with Pluto. And then we're also going to talk about, well, let me actually pull this book out here.
Mm.
I never did this before, but this is like the Library of Esoterica, Astrology. And here they also associated dignities with the outer planets. And I was like, okay, I would personally not do that, but I think it's a very interesting thought experiment. And they assigned the exaltation of Pluto in Leo and the fall in Cancer. And
Mm.
so I'm like, okay, that's it. And I guess the detriment then would be in the sign of Taurus if it's in domicile in Scorpio.
Mm.
So I'm wondering what your thoughts are when you
Mm.
hear me say this, or when you just encounter this.
Yeah, to feel into it. Yeah. You know, I do think when I think about even what's happening in the landscape in the Northern Hemisphere with these different zodiacal energies and how Pluto maybe synthesizes with them. I love obviously the domicile being Scorpio because what's happening in the landscape, at least where I am, is like this disrobing of all the trees and the le like there's a revealment happening, right, in
Hmm.
Scorpio, where there's a sense of like not only the topography of the underworld and being able to navigate it accordingly and like be in that excavation with Pluto. But I
Yeah.
think that there's something really powerful about the liberatory process of revealment, that it's like we're bringing things um, we're bringing things to the surface. I always say this in my healing work, but it's like to see it is to free it. And so there's something that is being able to be set free in that revealment with Pluto. And I feel that from Pluto is like the true nature of apocalypsis, like to uncover, right? Like it's an apocalyptic process, truly, to work with Pluto. And I think that there's something that resonates there with the exaltation in Leo. Like it's so much about visibility, in my opinion. Like there's so much there about shining light into the shadows, like you were saying.
Mhm.
When we allow the light to shine into the shadow realm, it like disperses the energy. I think about the etymology of catalyst, which is actually like to kind of dissolve something. And so that catalyst is not only transformative, but there's a dissolution happening as we shine light into the shadow. Feels very psychological, right? Like the
Yeah.
light of our awareness coming into the shadow realm. And I have thoughts about the falling Cancer. Do you want me to go? Do you want me to
Oh,
go there? Yeah,
please, yeah.
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 Well, I was thinking about this when you first sent me these proposed dignities, and I'm like, there is a curious thing about Cancer for me having so much of a connection of like bringing life into the world, right? Like this, how to say, like the origin of creation,
Yeah.
and this kind of like the impetus of creativity there with Cancer and being that life-giving element in a very nutritive, very like almost matrilineal way. I think of the river of life that runs through all things with Cancer. And so the fall is curious there because Pluto, it's not necessarily that Pluto always brings death and decay, but there is a very intense regenerative thing happening that feels almost at odds with the impetus for Cancer to bring life. It's like bringing life and then constantly being in this like churning and um, it feels emotionally intense, right? Like that lunar aspect of Cancer. It's like, whew, that is to I feel it in my body as like being in a constant process of regeneration and not just letting life-giving qualities be life-giving qualities, but always having to be like sucked into the great below. And it's it's a lot of emotional like turmoil, I feel. Um, so not to say that it's totally at odds with Cancerian principles, but it does feel like it would take a toll. It feels degradative, right?
Mm.
On those life-giving waters. So yeah, I'm curious how that lands for you.
Yeah, when you were saying this, I was just thinking of Pluto and Cancer being like in constant labor. That just does
Yes.
that just does not feel right.
No.
Um, and at the same time, I also often feel like Cancer is maybe one of the rare signs that can keep up with the depth of Scorpio. Because Cancer comes right at the summer solstice, and it's actually when, metaphorical or literally, depending on where you are in the world, the darkness actually kind of gets initiated again into the cycle. And the fact that the crab can, go all the way down into the ocean, and there's this whole mythology of like, okay, and then that mere goat Capricorn is born, which then, goes out from the depths. So I do feel like there is a quality that Cancer and Scorpio actually share together, and where I definitely don't think that Pluto in Cancer would be necessarily, or that Cancer and Pluto would necessarily be afraid of the depth of that. But I do think it is at odds with with the regenerative quality of like birthing and giving life.
Constant labor.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It feels a bit like that. I mean, I think it's also the reason why Mars is in fall in the sign of Cancer, right? Because it is at odds with that. And I could say the same thing about Mars and Cancer. Feels
Yes.
like that. Feels like that. And then there's always a quality of when a planet is in a fall in a sign where it has well, I don't know if privilege is the right word, but it has a quality of where it has an underdog quality for me, where it can do a lot. It can Like it can do a lot, it can get away with a lot more things than planets in
Mm,
exaltation can. Because
yeah,
the eyes are on, like
yeah.
planets in exaltation, they have all the pressure on them. It's like,
Mm, yeah.
it's like Mozart going, and you're like, yeah, like you're obviously gonna play good because you're Mozart. And you're like, fuck, I don't know. Planets in fall is like nobody expects anything from you. And so if you just come here and do the thing that nobody expected you to do, you actually might, win at your chess move or however you want to put it. So definitely want to bring that forth here as well, which I think ties good into the metaphor of, because that's what people are afraid of. People are afraid
Mm.
of Pluto. People are afraid of planets in fall. People are afraid of Saturn. That's usually one of the reasons.
Yes, yes, this is so true. And I love this making a case for how there's hidden beauty. Like for me, I've said it, but there's such a homeopathic quality to Pluto. Like the medicine is in the poison, you know? And it's interesting to consider how much, even in like my background with Ayurveda, like cancer has so much about like the fluids of the body and that nourishing principle. And for me, there's actually like a strong potential for healing at this like deep emotional level with Pluto in Cancer, right? Like it's, to me, it feels like generational healing. It feels like being able to even like metabolize some of the impressions that we might receive from lineage, which is heavy work, but it's like, wow, how yeah, how regenerative that is in its nature is also it's quite beautiful if you think about it this way, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny that we're talking about it because none of us are going to experience Pluto and Cancer in our lifetimes, but
Yes.
but I do think it's a interesting thought experiment. Like I wonder how they came to these conclusions, and yeah, maybe to also speak a bit more on like Pluto and Leo because we haven't talked so much about that.
Yeah.
I can totally see that part, right?
Yeah.
Because Pluto brings things to the surface, things to
Mhm.
be looked at. And in turn, that is actually, I think it's a lot of like, the philosophy of Carl Jung of facing the subconscious shadow, because once you face it, once you realize that it's just a shadow, it's much more easier to integrate that and become the true authentic self, which is everything Leo.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I really like what's happening here, honestly. Like I'm gonna try not to go off too far, but I will say there's
Okay.
something there's something really profound to me. Like I have a big background in like non-dual traditions, and I think what I love about the exaltation in Leo is the interplay that I sense between light and shadow here, and that there is this quality to the illumination of light or the light of our awareness that when it's actually like cast upon the world, we see that these perceived differentiations between like contrast or what does and doesn't belong actually become part of the same thing, right? I'm thinking about the visual of how when light is cast upon a shadow, that shadow too becomes light. It like absorbs everything. And so there's like almost I feel a little hidden um like philosophical musing in that exaltation, which is
I
like
agree.
no, like it's all part of the same thing. And the contrast of the shadow is like a play of perception, that separateness is somewhat of an illusion, and that when we bring these shadows into the light, we see them for what they really are, which is that they all belong to the same field of awareness. Um, it feels quite beautiful, and like there's a little play of non-duality in there too. But I also, when I first sat with the exaltation in Leo, and maybe we can talk more about this when we get to the myths part, I remembered how in the myth of Persephone, at least in the way that I connect with it, Helios is the only one that sees Persephone sucked into the underworld, right? Helios, the solar aspect, is like able to see this
Hmm.
catabasis, this descent take place. And there's something about the witnessing of the descent that I felt a connection to with the exaltation in Leo. Like it was just curious to me, the way that the myth kind of cued
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
No, that's good. I haven't even thought about it in that way, but it's such a brilliant point to bring up.
Mm.
Um, And yeah, I can totally see that because I think one of the biggest aspects of healing the shadow, if you will, is through witnessing yourself, others. That is one way how you integrate it. You stop being afraid of it.
Yeah.
And it's like if you don't, I mean, one of the reasons why I guess, a lot of people believe, and I do believe that too, why the shadow is so huge in our world is because people are not facing it.
Right.
They're not facing it. And then, and then it gets played out in this grotesque, horrible ways, and everybody is sitting in front of the TV and is being shook
Yeah.
about it.
Yes. Yeah. And there's something, I don't know, the quality of Leo in its connection to the heart makes me wonder about how, for me, a lot of trauma and fragmentation, which is connected to Pluto's medicine in some ways, a lot of it is like welcoming those exiled parts back into the heart, back into love and compassion. And so there's something beautiful I feel in the exaltation in Leo that's like calling all of those fragmented, exiled parts of the shadow back into like the world's heart and into that source of love. Yeah, it feels like a hidden recipe for healing in there, you
It
know? It's kind of
does.
sweet. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and to, maybe talk a bit more about Pluto and Scorpio, right, which is the modern day ruler. Um, I think, well, one of the things that, and I mean, when I came into astrology, this is how I came into astrology, and I was also all about, you know, Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio. But then when I dove into ancient Hellenistic astrology and I think what I realized is the outer planetary rulerships actually really take away from the traditional rulers, where I'm like, wow, it actually gives Mars such a deeper dimension. And actually, a lot of the things that we associate with Scorpio isn't necessarily Pluto, it's actually Mars. And Mars is not just Aries. Like Mars is the yin or like the feminine expression of Scorpio. And there's, I mean, wow, there's just so much to be said about that. And I think unjustly putting so much of that onto Pluto diminishes, well, each of them. It diminishes Scorpio, it diminishes Mars, and it diminishes Pluto's qualities. And I know that a lot of people also, and that's partially fault of the astrology ABC, is associate the eighth house then also with Scorpio and with Pluto, which I think is interesting because I think the eighth house is much more Pluto than it is specifically Scorpio,
Yeah.
because the eighth house in ancient times have been called the gates of Hades, which is
Yeah.
so Pluto. So I can see how, like, through that confusion and actually astrologers trying to simplify astrology, they just like made a mumble jumble in like that eighth house, whatever. And I think it kind of takes away of like Scorpio and Mars here, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's almost like a compartmentalization that happens where we like take apart these energies and in my experience it's like we're missing their fullness when we kind of extract them in this way. Like I I think what gets lost on just seeing Mars as the ruler of Aries, just seeing Pluto as the ruler of Scorpio, is that it also creates certain assumptions about those signs and those planets, where it's like Mars in Scorpio has so much to teach us about the assertion of will and emotional power and like the embodied level of that instinctual force, right? And like I love this concept that the arrow of Mars is pointed down in Scorpio. It's like this incredible descent into that power that's within us. It's not about the outer world anymore. It's
Yep.
about the inner world. Um, and likewise, I feel when we just see Pluto as the ruler of Scorpio, there's this maybe subliminal association with it just being about intensity and just being like there is this thing that I come across a lot with folks that maybe are just starting out in astrology that are also scared of Scorpio and then scared of Scorpios in the world, which I'm like, yo, we're missing the fullness here. It's like, don't do that to us, you know? But it is the sense too that it's like Scorpio is also not just about death and rebirth processes. Although that is a big part of it, like there's so much emotional capacity there that is stunning and like a real
Mm.
gift. And also like I feel that from Pluto too, is like he's not just some fearsome I do use he him pronouns for Pluto Hades, but there is this beautiful richness, like the minerals in the soil and the oof, just the fecundity there that gets missed when we see it as just this kind of haunting, scary place. Like the eighth house to me is a whole landscape. It's a
Yeah,
whole topography. And I mean, I feel so at home there. I'm sure you do too, there's to a certain degree. So yeah, it's like what happens when we kind of bring everything back into again a right-sized place. Yeah, yeah,
fully agree.
yeah.
I'm like, if I had a dime for every time someone was like Pluto Scorpio transformation.
It's like, okay,
Like,
that's a platitude. Yeah.
yeah, like I almost don't want to even use that word anymore. Even though certainly, obviously, Pluto is about transformation. Like,
Yeah.
yes, but it's a very overused word, and what happens with me when people are overusing words is that I always have this urge to like, how can I look at it from a different perspective? Like, what is more to that?
Yep. Yep.
And and that's the same again, what you said. It also takes from the eighth house if we are just like, oh, that's Scorpio. It's like the
Right.
eighth house is also so much. I mean, all the houses are so
Oh
much
my.
more. And I honestly also just feel it's a bit unfair to be like, oh yeah, two of the water signs, Scorpio and Pisces, have like the worst houses. Like, where is the fairness in that?
Oh, my 12th house son is like, no. I love the 12th house too. Yeah, very
No,
controversial.
no, I'm not demonizing the 12th house, but it's
Yes.
just
No, I hear you though. It really
yeah.
is that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which I mean, it also makes people are so fearful of the eighth
Yeah.
house, um, which is funny because the eighth house is about fears. Yeah, so like, of course, they would be fearful about the eighth house, but it's also, it's so much more. But if you want to hear me talk about the eighth house, there's a whole eighth house episode that you can go watch in depth where we're gonna explore that. But we might bring it up here and there, I think, when we talk about Pluto. Yes, which, well, do you have anything to say about like the detriment in Taurus?
You know, it's interesting. I part of me is like, sure, I could see that, but I just feel so connected to the kind of yeah, I'm probably going to use this word a million times, but like the fecundity of the Taurus Scorpio axis, that to me is like a place that they so deeply belong to each other,
Mm.
like they so deeply belong to a process of regeneration. And I think about how, as Hades brings the souls and the bodies to the underworld, that matter can't be destroyed. So it must be turned into flowers and soil and like our bodies must become one with the land when we return to him, And so there's something, it's just like I can't, like, sure, I see the detriment in Taurus, but I also see the necessity of Pluto in Taurus as the compost, as the mushrooms in the soil that are eating bodies and turning them into flowers. Like it's just, it's so rich to me that I'm like, the yeah, I don't connect to the detriment there, honestly. I'm like, I see it as an oppositional aspect that maybe there's something to be said about the regeneration of life, but I just feel they belong to one another so deeply, the Taurus Scorpio energies there for the processes that Pluto is inviting us into. I mean, he's the god of wealth, and it's not just like to me, he's the god of like the wealth of the land, so it's very agricultural, and I feel that that's a gift that Taurus has. So I don't know. I'm kind of like, sure. I'm curious your thoughts
Oh,
on it.
I
Yeah.
no, I fully agree with you. I think the Scorpio Taurus axis is for me is the quintessential life, death, life axis. And we can even see it very well. I mean, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, which a lot of Western astrology was based upon, is
Mm,
the whole notion of, yeah, like in Scorpio season, it's the composting process, and a lot of things are happening underground. That doesn't mean they're happening. And this composting process is then the nourishment that the plants need to be rebirthed in Taurus, right? So it almost feels like that axis is the Plutonian process in and of itself, if anything.
Exactly. I fully agree. Yeah, they need each other. Yeah. Hmm.
Heck yeah. Yeah, so we can, okay, I think that is enough said for for that. Maybe we can talk a bit about like Pluto's discovery. Because okay, that's actually gonna because you said that when Pluto was discovered, it was actually in Cancer, right?
Yes. Yes, which is so interesting. Yeah, it was at like 17 degrees of Cancer when they first found it on the little this tool. What it was, it like a blink microscope, which I think I just love it. There's something about the discovery in 1930 to be specific. Like who was it? Lowell.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm not sure of the name myself. If you want to, you
Percival.
can okay.
Yes, Percival Lowell, which is where we get the little PL glyph, apparent. Like,
Oh, okay.
yes,
Wait,
Percival Lowell.
I even didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, this is like I'm like reaching into the recesses of like first studying astrology, but I do remember that piece. Like the little PL is like a way to honor him because
Oh,
he like
yeah.
Planet X was what he called it in 1902, and it was like the potential for he was basically like, I believe that this planet exists because of an incongruency between like Uranus and Neptune's orbit. But then this like young 24-year-old dude, Clyde, discovered it in Texas in 1930, and that's when it was in Cancer. So I just find it interesting that it was like supposedly at a place of fall when it was discovered. It's kind of, yeah,
This is
there it is.
the glyph, by the way.
Percival
Just
Lowell. There it is. But
yeah,
the
and wait,
discovery process, yeah, go ahead.
let me draw the the other
The
glyph. I
other,
guess Pluto is cool and has two glyphs, but
yeah.
that's the other glyph. So you have the PL or this one.
I
Both
love
of them
this.
are Pluto.
Yes. Yeah, but it was so cool. I kind of nerded out about how it was discovered using this like photographic technique that was a blink microscope because it felt so connected to actually how the Egyptians were differentiating stars from wandering stars or planets, which is like observing the sky and using these blips to see what was moving and what wasn't. And they like caught Pluto way far out there in orbit in one of these little blips. Um, it's just so cool to me. There's something so nerdy about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just thinking how we're not even at 100 years yet. Like in 2030, we'll have 100 years of
The
Pluto's
baby.
discovery. It's
Yeah.
yeah, and I guess well, one thing that's cool about astrology and when you do discover objects is that you can backtrack them. And that's why a lot of people, even though like when they talk historically about Pluto, like even though Pluto was not discovered at that time, all of a sudden things, things like the French Revolution, which is very linked to also Pluto being in Aquarius, which we're having right now, is that they can link that back to that, even though at that time Pluto was not yet
Right.
officially a thing that existed in the spheres, but it's always, yeah, it's always curious when a planet pops up in astrology. It kind of like always shapeshifts the whole system, and everyone's like, okay. I mean, I can only believe it's almost like an astrology orgasm because everyone's like, whoa, I can now go and observe the patterns all of a sudden.
Yes. The patterns. Yes. Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing too because I have also had like a teacher that was like, "Well, we don't credit it in a chart until it's discovered." And I'm like, "I don't know, it's still in the sky, you know?" So there's something about that too, which is like the chicken or the egg, and
Mm.
how we're interpreting these things, you know. Yeah. Yeah, and of course the controversy that Pluto like was a planet and then isn't a planet, and I'm like, you'll always be planet to me, maybe. You know? Yeah. I remember being
Yeah.
so mad about that as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I read a, oh gosh, I'll have to research that. You're reminding me right now that I read an article not too long ago, and I sadly don't remember right now from which astrologer it was, but something about the fact of like you know how planets can be inbound and out of bound and things like that. And obviously with Pluto, that is because Pluto is super slow moving, that takes a longer time. And the fact that it kind of like coincided with when Pluto went out of bounds, when
Mm.
they like dismissed it as a planet or something like that.
No
I'll have to
way.
I'll 100% link that in the description when I go over it. But I don't know right now by heart, but that is
I'm writing this down.
yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
That would
that
be
is.
crazy.
Yeah,
That could,
that is maybe, I mean, I put it a bit later on here, but I do think maybe it's worth talking about Pluto's very weird orbit right now because
yeah.
I think it fits into that conversation. So Pluto is an odd one out planet, and that's also kind of why they dismissed it as an official planet because it moves in a very different orbit around the sun. And with all the other planets, there's like a pattern of, okay, well, like Neptune's in a sign for 14 years and Uranus is in a sign for 7 years. And then with Pluto is like, well, it depends because in Scorpio it's like 8 years, but then in Taurus it's 20 plus years. So it's very different. And I always chuckle that Pluto is actually the least amount in the sign it's supposed to have its domicile in.
True. True. That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know, is it the longest in which sign?
Well, I think it's the longest in Taurus if it's the shortest
Oh,
in
yeah.
Scorpio, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow, that's so interesting,
But
isn't
it
it?
is, I mean, we're with Aquarius, we're like entering the 20-year mark. So it's gonna be even longer in Pisces and in Aries. And yeah, this is also one of the reasons why like generational wise, people have a lot of like the Pluto, like that's why the Pluto and Leo generation is still alive and they're getting a Pluto opposition, but
Right.
us who have Pluto and Sagittarius, we're not gonna experience that. We're not gonna have that.
That's so interesting. I mean, yeah, there's something there that feels like yeah, I could muse on it for a while, but that's interesting to consider how like Pluto has certain curriculum for certain, I'm like, okay, clearly the Pluto and Leo crew has some shit to work out that they're getting this opposition. What does he have planned for us, you know? That's so interesting. Yeah, and I just love how wacky his like very stretched out, like it's like a roller coaster
Yeah.
orbit, but also so slow. Um, yeah, I feel that in how I experience even working with Hades sometimes where yeah, there's such patience. They're like, "No, no, we got time. We got time to learn this one." It's like we're gonna take our sweet time moving all the way around this. Yeah. Oof. Building worlds, rebuilding worlds. Yeah, I feel that so strongly from his orbit. Yeah. Mm.
Yes, and there's also many people that associate generations with Pluto.
Mm.
I would group it more with Neptune, to be completely
Yeah.
honest, just because the orbit with Pluto is so weird.
Wonky, yeah.
But I can, yeah, yeah, it is very peculiar the fact that like the Pluto and Leo generation is alive. That they're like the baby boomer generation, the
Yeah.
boomers. They're getting the opposition now, and all the other generations are also like Pluto in Virgo, Pluto in Libra, Scorpio, Sag, and
Yeah.
well, Capricorn. Uh, right, they're still. Well, no, they're getting there. I think they turned adults
Yeah.
by now, the first ones with Pluto
The
in
first.
Capricorn.
Yes. Yeah, it's so interesting to consider like yeah, I was thinking about that the other day because I'm coming out of like separating from the Pluto sextile. And
Yeah.
it's like that could hold depending on what's happening in the orbit, you could be held in that sextile for a long time or a really
Mhm.
short amount of time. Isn't that interesting? It's like yeah, I kind of like the differentiation. There's something about it to me that's like it feels connected to what's coming through those like zodiacal territories and like how that's influencing maybe our like psychological processes. That's where my kind of musing brain goes around it. But yeah, it somehow feels fitting to me in the way that like healing is non-linear, that there's this like very strange kind of destabilized transit, you know? But it's still, yeah, like I think about how it still has this perfect kind of like, I think it's a 3-to-2 ratio with Neptune's orbit. And so there is still a nice architecture to it where it's connected to Neptune in that way. You know, like for every three, I think it's for every 3 rounds that Neptune makes, Pluto will make two or something like this. So
Oof,
it's
I'm
interesting to
not
think
quite sure.
about like
Mhm.
their relationship is it just stands out to me. And I agree with you that Neptune feels more generational, and then Pluto is bringing this kind of maybe more peripheral psychological thing in the conditions of our
Mm.
reality, you know? Like their relationship just has always stood out to me. So, it's curious for sure, because Neptune is a bit more reliable for the generational aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, and Neptune also just for me has so much to do with social trends.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it makes
totally.
sense how Neptune is like really weaved into like what people are kind of into and what defines a generation and Pluto. Well, I think it's interesting now because we have so many of the Pluto generations alive, but they're gonna get like shorter and short. I mean, no, Pluto is gonna be longer in a sign, but it's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
like the difference is gonna be less because there's gonna be well, even with Pluto in Aquarius, right? It's gonna be there till like 2043, if I'm not mistaken, 2043, 2044. Like that's a long ass time. And that's so many, like that's a big span of time where everyone's gonna have Pluto in Aquarius. And
Yeah,
back then it was like 1/3 of that with Pluto in
yeah.
Scorpio. Like that's
That's
so much
crazy.
shorter.
You know, I don't think I've ever really thought about it that way. Yeah. Wow. Wow. I'm thinking about like some of the folks that I've read for that have that Pluto and Scorpio. I'm like, wow, you're rare. You know?
Getting
Wow.
the square now sometime. Well,
Yes.
it may be a long time.
On its way. Yeah, that is really funny. Yeah. Taking his sweet time coming around the bend. Wow. Yeah. Oof. There's a lot there.
Yeah, so okay, well, because I think it fits more to just mention it now, and then afterwards we can talk more about the myth. Um, the Pluto cycle. One Pluto cycle is 248 years. So none of us will get a Pluto return.
Mhm.
But again, what we mentioned before, some of us will get a Pluto sextile. Everyone that has their Pluto in Sag, for example, which I'm just mentioning because that's us. We're getting a Pluto sextile right now, or again, a square trine and also opposition. If you have your Pluto in Leo, you're gonna get your opposition. And yeah, so it really depends on where you
Mhm.
have your Pluto and how much or how little it's gonna get aspected.
Yeah, and I think it's just such an interesting thing where like you might get a slower burn. Yeah, like you
I
might
think so, yeah.
slower burn, which is yeah, it's just interesting to me to think how, for example, how slowly Pluto's moving through Aquarius right now, and the level of connection that I feel it has to like the collective human experience. Like it makes sense actually that there's almost more excavation for us to do in
Yeah.
that realm that then activates, you know, whether it be the square or the sextile or the opposition. There's more tending to do. And I feel that that's kind of evident in what we're seeing right now. Thinking about too, like last time, like these previous times that Pluto was in Aquarius, like we see a lot of regeneration happening in culture and the
Yeah.
collective body. So, um, yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on the 248 years. To me, it feels like the tectonic plates of empire are shifting, you know, and like it does. I don't want to say fall of empire energy, but it does feel like that apocalypsis vibe where it's like, no, the truth is
Mm.
being revealed so that we can regenerate, you know, and make things good compost. Yeah. Mm.
Well. We're gonna talk about that when Pluto moves into Aries.
Yeah, facts. Yeah, that's a good point.
But it's yeah, I can definitely see. I mean, again, with Pluto and Aquarius, the most recent transit of that was coincidental with the French Revolution, even though I must say it didn't immediately happen. It
Yeah.
wasn't like Pluto and Uranus and Aquarius, boom, French Revolution, like not at all. It
Right.
actually, I was when I was doing the Decan workshop for Aquarius, I was really looking through all of that because I was like, okay, in which like decans was Pluto traveling through? And it really only like starts to become a thing in the second decan and then kind of like exploded and had its ends in the third decan of Aquarius, which I'm not surprised. Like the first decan, Pluto going through that first decan of Aquarius was really just a build up, which I
Yeah.
think we are experiencing right now. I think we're still in the phase where I don't know, it hasn't reached a full tipping point yet, you know,
Right.
and it's not enough for people to go out on the streets and change something. We're still all a bit too comfortable. And by no means do I, you know, I'm not, oh, I want to be uncomfortable. I want everything to be chaotic. I want the,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I do think we're still like there, and it's
Yeah.
only gonna and it's really interesting because the French Revolution really ended basically once Pluto moved into Pisces. Like that
Yes.
is much more poignant. So yeah, you know, obviously history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. We might not get the exact same French Revolution,
Oh,
but I do think similarities are undeniable in the world right now.
yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's interesting to think about the movement through the decades. And I feel that there's almost an arc of like disintegration. Like we have to take shit apart in order to put it back together. And just thinking about how there's like a recoherence that will come in the latter half of the transit. But yeah, for me, it's like if I've been thinking about this a lot lately. If we see destruction at face value and only see it as destruction without the potential for creation, then it's going to feel overwhelming and disorienting. And I feel like that's really what we are seeing right now. Is like it doesn't, there's not a lot of evidence for the creative aspect of this process. But what we know of Pluto is that that will come, right? Like
Yeah.
Pluto is not just about decay, it's also there's regeneration on the other side. So at least that's what I tell myself. That's what I'm
Uh,
trying to, yeah, yeah. It's very real. Yeah.
I know what you mean. I think again with all of these things, it's always so easy to sit here and talk about them, but actually
Right.
go, you know, I mean, actually going through Pluto transit, I would
Right.
say rarely in the moment is it fun.
Right.
It,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
I don't think it's meant to be. I don't think Pluto is meant to be a fun transit. It's not a Venus Jupiter trine.
Right. Oh my God, yeah. And it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're in it. Like
Yeah.
that's very real. In myself and in others, I'm like, you're gonna make it through this, baby. There will be the aspect of like regeneration. Yeah, you're becoming compost right now. Can you feel it? Yeah. Oh,
Talking
yeah.
about becoming compost.
Yes.
Let's talk about about the like mythology of
Oh,
Pluto, which is linked to Hades. By no surprise. I mean, their names are kind of like interchangeable, right? If I'm not mistaken, it's people do sometimes use like Pluto and Hades interchangeably, and it's
mm,
linked to the myth of Persephone, which, by the way, also in my eyes, like yes, Pluto is involved there, but Venus is
mhm.
just as much involved in this whole story as well, uh, which would be Persephone in and
Yeah.
of itself. So,
Yes, totally. Oh my God. How much time do we have?
well,
I'm like,
I'm
I
gonna
could
let you
really.
talk about this because you said this is your
Ah.
life.
This is my life. Well, yeah, I think for me, I love what you just planted there about how Pluto and Hades. I mean, there's so much encoded here. I think about how Pluto is seen more as this kind of like agricultural god of wealth. For me, it's so connected to the land and like the fertility of the soil and all that is required for those conditions. But interestingly, Hades, you know, the etymology of the name is like the unseen
Yeah.
one. which I just there's something if I could really muse about it for a moment, there's something I feel in even I think it's like the Titanomachy. I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, but like the story of, do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I
A
do, but I
poquito?
wouldn't know
Yeah.
how to pronounce it either.
Yeah. But I just love this kind of origin story of Hades being born of Kronos. And then, of course, in Kronos' like terror of, the fear of being overthrown, he eats his children. And
Yeah.
there's something so poetic to me about like Zeus and Poseidon and Hades being in the belly of time, being in the belly of Kronos in this big way. And obviously, eventually overthrowing him. But I share this to really consider when we talk about Hades or Pluto, like what is he really the god of? Because it's not, again, it's not just the underworld, right? And in the overthrowing of, Zeus setting the brothers free from their father's guts and overthrowing him, they actually merge with the Titans in their respective realms of land, sea, and sky. So Zeus obviously gets the sky, Poseidon the ocean, and then Hades gets the earthly realm. And so there's something here that I feel is actually really reminiscent of actually certain Celtic relationships between the rulership of the land being in service to the sovereignty of the land itself, because Hades actually merges with Gaia to become the lord of the earthly and the under, right? And so there's something that I feel is like so poetic about in order to actually be the king of the underworld in this way, he has to devote himself to the sovereignty of the land or the earth as a body. And I don't really experience him anymore as, this individual godhead in personhood. I experience him as the conditions of our physical reality, and that like his body is the land merged with Gaia. It's
Mm.
actually quite romantic. Oh, I love it. And then the crate below the some of the ways that the underworld is described is also reminiscent of a body and like the bile and the fluids and the conditions for decay and regeneration. But I say this because if we only experience him as the underworld, we're missing like the crust of the earth and the soil and the conditions that are required for life. And that is where we see this maybe dual aspect of the realm with Persephone as the maiden of spring and of course Demeter as the mother of the harvest. Like they're all the three of them, the trifecta of them are really to me they're kind of collaborating with creating the conditions of our earthly world. And for at this point in my practice and in my life, I see all of them in the land. Like they are the body of the landscape, you know? And that's what I love so much, bringing it full circle about Hades as the unseen one, because it's like he is everywhere. It's the water we swim in. He is this reality, and he's unseen because he's hidden in everything. And it just feels so like whew. Um, yeah, so that's my mu my musing on him. But yeah, there's something
Great.
very like embodied about it. His epithet as the all receiver is like our body will return to him. We will re-merge with the soil and become part of him. So yeah, I'll end it there for now. Yeah.
I'm like, please talk more if you want to. I do wanna there's actually a passage from this book that I don't know, I've quoted it 10 million times, but it's like
Yes,
The Dream and the Underworld.
James Bowman.
And one part of it talks about Hades specifically, and I feel like that I want to read it here because that makes it's
Yeah.
gonna make sense. And I'm just gonna read like the parts that I underlined, so I'm not gonna read the whole chapter because that would take just a teeny bit too long. But
Mm.
um, one part in the beginning that I underlined was that nature loves to hide, then nature loves Hades. And then we
Oh,
go into, yeah, makes so much sense with the story. He is so invisible, in fact, that the entire collection of Greek antique art shows no ideal portrait of Hades, such as we are familiar with other gods. So
mm,
there is something about Hades that is very like ominous in the way that he doesn't actually even really have a face or a figure to
yeah.
like fully grasp. Hades' name was rarely used. At times, he was referred to as the Unseen One, more often as Pluto or as Trophonius.
Hmm.
These disguises of Hades have been taken by some interpreters to be covering euphemisms for the fear of death, but then why this particular euphemism and not some other? Perhaps
Hmm.
Pluto is a description of Hades, much as Plato understood this god. Then Pluto refers to the hidden wealth or the riches of the invisible. Hence, we can understand one reason why there was no cult and no sacrifices to him. Hades was the wealthy one, the giver of nourishment to the soul. Sometimes he
Hmm.
was fused with Thanatos, which is like the god of death, or of whom Aeschylus wrote, "Death is the only god who loves not gifts and cares not for sacrifices or liberation, who has no altars and receives no hymns." Even though we're
Hmm.
gonna read the Orphic hymn to Hades in the
Yes.
on vase paintings, when Hades is shown, he may have his face averted, as if he were not even characterized by a specific physiognomy.
Mhm.
I never know how to pronounce that word. Um, all this negative evidence does coalesce to form a definite image of a void, an interiority or depth that is unknown but nameable, there and felt even if not seen. Hades is not an absence but a hidden presence, even an invisible fullness. I really love that
I
sentence.
could cry.
I think
That is
that is
incredible.
very, very important for people to like if they want to work with Pluto, or how often just Pluto also feels in transits. It's like it's not an absence, it's a hidden presence that is always there, an invisible fullness.
Oh, I love that so much. Oh, that was so gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah, and for me, it's also in some of these non-dual traditions in the past, I've always loved the way that there's this interplay that the divine or like the source of creation is hidden in everything in our material world, and that she's like playing hide and seek with us. And I feel
Yes.
this from Hades, that it's like our interest in beauty is not trivial because we're recognizing a glimmer of something that's like right there. It's so close to us. And I feel this at times, like some of the, how to say it, the kind of like riveting quality, maybe that's not really the word for it, but it's like the imminence of how can it be said more plainly, life and death are one. This is like
Hmm.
it's so close. It's closer to us than our own jugular vein, right? It's
Mm.
like oof. And there's this ecstasy I feel from the merge state where like if we give, and I feel this from Pluto in my chart sometimes too, that it's like if I give myself to beauty or to pleasure intensely enough, it feels like I'm dying, right? It's like the power of an orgasm, right? Le petit mort, like these little deaths. And it's like that imminence, that intensification of life and death being so close to one another that if they were to become one, like the world would collapse. This is what I feel from Hades. It's like this, yeah, just this like intimacy with it all. And that's at times why I feel it's so intense because it's like right here and we can feel it and it's terrifying, but there is a kind of ecstasy to it. It's the same force that creates life that takes it, you know? And we all know it and we're walking through the realm like, whew, we just yeah, it's right there. It's right under our nose. So I love him. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was good. I want to bring like a small story into all of this from my personal life, which is okay, so a small preface. Basically, my mom sometimes does like these mask building courses, but she really like learned it from a woman, but now her and a friend sometimes. Anyways, my point is that I also made a mask. And when you do this mask, which this is not specifically about the process, which is a whole ritual in and of itself, but what happens then, at some point, you get together with the other people and then you do these mask plays, which is also, you go into like this, you create the room and it's really about, well, it's actually much easier to step into these characters because you are literally putting on a mask and then you kind of go into the stage and it's a subconscious play at hand, like in front of you. It becomes more real and more visible. It's very Jungian, if we
Yes.
want to put it that way. And you can also play, yeah, like you don't necessarily have to. put on or play your mask. It kind of just naturally happens, like with all these things. And so I saw this mask that somebody did, and it was like clearly the death mask, you know, it had that vibe, and I just kind of like really wanted to play death. And
Love
so
it.
and so I went on the stage, and what happened is when I like went into this character, which I would say is like a Plutonian character or archetype, is I felt extremely powerful. And what's always interesting into this place, whatever you think about that, it becomes very different. Because once you put on that, like you tap into a whole different world. And what ended up happening is that I was just kind of like walking back and forth, and I felt so fine doing that. You know, I was like, there's nothing else that I should be doing right now. And you also always give an instrument to a person that like a comp because you're not really talking when you're under the mask. Like you're not really like you can make some noises, but you're not talking. But so you have an instrument that you give someone, and then this person is kind of like guiding you with the instrument. And well, I don't really know how that instrument is called, but I gave this person this like circular thing with like a lot of these like small balls inside of them. I don't know what that is called, but like you wave it around, right? And they're just like and and she then said that this really felt like my character that was going back and forth, you know, the like these tiny little
Yeah.
balls are just moving and you can't really stop it. You can't stop death, you know? It's just it's there, it's constantly there. And
Wow.
then another character came at play, and that's always the fun part, right? And it was like this really lively mask. And I was like, okay, I don't really know what to do with that. And you know, eventually we kind of just started this like dance until I basically laid that person to rest. And it felt
Oh,
so natural and so peaceful. There was there was no fear in that moment. It was just like an inevitability. And it felt so, you know, it felt, I was like, if death feels like that, I'm not afraid of it.
oh, yes.
Yeah, and that's kind of how that play ended. Curious part after that play ended, the next play that happened was for some reason that person or the lively mask wanted to be played again, and it was almost as if like, well, what happens after death? Well, life gets reborn again, you know?
Oh,
It
I love
continues.
this.
It
It's so
continues. And that for me feels very, very Pluto and Hades. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I love this so much. It honestly it reminds me a lot of like yeah, just the intimacy for many years I was doing work as a death doula and there's such a it's not to romanticize it because it's actually really challenging and there's a lot of grief involved, but there's so much beauty too. Like I got to be the doula for my grandmother a few months ago, and it's like the intimacy with this process is like I there's such an aliveness to it. Like
Mm,
you can feel the proximity between life and death in the same moment, which is like it's almost overwhelming, like the amount of intensity
yeah.
that even your animal body responds to it. But it's so there's a yeah, I'll say it like it feels sublime. Like there's something really sublime about it. So yeah, I love this story. It feels like you got that real embodied experience of their dance. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that was really nice. So, which I find, you know, I haven't really experienced a lot of death in my life so
Yeah.
far. Luckily, I guess. It's but even last year, one of my cats passed away, and that was like one of the first where I was like really directly there, like even though I was working as a person in a retirement home, and people passed away there, I was like never really like present in that moment actually. So it never like really touched
Yeah.
me that deeply or came to me that closely. And that was also it was a very touching, intimate process. And
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I don't I don't even really know. I don't want to specifically say anything with that, but just the fact
Yeah.
that like to honor that, to be present in
Yeah.
that moment is maybe like the most loving thing that you can do because it's truly a once in a lifetime experience. And I would want, I would want for me to be able to go through that final
Yeah.
surrender and letting go um, in good company, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So beautiful. And that's why I feel like, honestly, Hades really does get a bad rep, but there's such a patience. There's such a patience to
yes.
him. Like, oh, I mean, consider the reality in the aliveness of the myth of an immortal whose full-time job is receiving mortals and like the grief and all that comes with it. Like there's so much to this being the one who witnesses all deaths and the receiver of all, right? Of all souls. And I don't know, to me there's because in the way that I experience like whether it's an actual death that's occurring or even like a metaphorical death, it's as if it's as if you enter time beyond time, like something
Mhm.
pauses and there's an opening. And I feel him in that opening. And there's a patience to him where he's not going to force us through that passage, but there is a sense of like receptivity to him that feels actually quite feminine to me at times, where it feels like a
It
very
does.
like tender father figure. Like it does resonate with that Scorpio quality to me, where it's like, no, I have
Mhm.
so much capacity for you to take your time with this. And like it's going to be hard, and I'm here with you. Like I really feel that. I wove Hades into some of the death doula work I was doing, and I just felt this immense patience wash over me at those moments where the veil actually opened, where he's like, no, truly, we have all the time in the world. Like be present, be present. And for me, it's this feeling of like, don't miss this. Like the whole world opens up at the threshold of life and death. Don't miss it. It's like the top of a breath, and before you take your final exhale, like really be all the way present with that feeling. And to me, it feels like that's also you actually shared something to your story, I think yesterday, this passage that is so beautiful about like the relationship between life and death.
Oh.
And I just
Yeah.
love that, like that quote is just so stunning because it hits the nail on the head there with that kind of that hang time. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Let me read it
Pull it
briefly
up.
so people are not wondering.
Yeah, recite, recite.
I'm gonna recite. I believe it's by Khalil Gibran. I hope it is, or
Yes.
one of the other poets. Gosh.
Yeah.
But it's my house says to me, do not leave me, for here dwells your past, and the road says to me, come and follow me, for I am your future. And I say to both my house and the road, I have no past, nor have I a future. If I stay here, there is a going in my staying, and if I go, there is a staying in my going. Only love and death change all things. That's the last bit is specifically important.
So perfect. There is a coming in my going and a going in my staying.
Yeah,
Ugh, it's so
that is
perfect.
also such a nice part. And yeah, and I love what you said before because I'm like, that's exactly how I felt when I was playing this figure. I was like, I have so much time. There is absolutely no rush whatsoever. And it's not, there is no forcing. People surrender to Hades. It's not the other way around. There is no coercion. There is no forcing. There's just a surrender that eventually, right, which I think is also I can totally see how people would, come with Scorpio here, where it's like it's harder to hold on, and you're like essentially you're basically like take me, like take
Yeah.
me.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that there's such an irony to this that is where I feel so much of like Pluto or Scorpio or Hades is like bringing that element of truth. Like it's the truth of all truths, where we spend our whole life like running towards death and also trying to run away from it at the same time. Like we're
Yeah.
in this chaotic process of like, oh, I'm terrified to die and I'm racing against time and I'm also like because I'm trying to run away from death, I'm actually running directly towards it and just rushing through everything. And then the moment we actually get there, the whole world is suspended and time dissolves even for a second. And there's this, yeah, like I love what you're saying, and the surrendering to it, where there's no more, like we actually fully reconcile our relationship to time and mortality at the moment of death. It's so incredible, actually. Like my Nana said something to me right before she passed, and it was this sense of like she is a woman that spent her whole life in that like kind of rat race. And I was so proud of her. She was like, I'm ready to go home. Like I'm ready. And that readiness I never thought I would see in her. And it was like the whole world opened when she said that. And that's what I feel is the
Mm.
power of this presence. And honestly, the power of Pluto here too is this sense of like vast capacity to hold that presence and be like, yep, stay with it. I'm right here. Um, there's a lot I could like, there's something there about this like hubris piece that we see in the myth of Orpheus too. Um, but yeah, I'm curious if you have any other thoughts on that death piece. Yeah.
No, not specifically. I'm more curious right now what you were having to say with Orpheus.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes around full circle to like the way that we might see this show up in the chart too with Pluto, or just like our relationship to Pluto's energies in general and like connecting this presence of Hades is like I really feel it in the myth of Orpheus, which are you familiar like with him?
Partially.
Okay, so he loses his love dies, Eurydice dies and goes to the underworld, and Orpheus is the first mortal, right, to request to make passage into the underworld to retrieve Eurydice. Um, and Hades has never let this happen before. And he's like, okay, if I do this, it sets a precedent that like other mortals are gonna think they can come get their love out of the underworld. Like there's been regeneration, there's been rebirth, but there's never been an actual retrieval, right? Where someone is taken back from death. But Hades sees the hubris in Orpheus, which is like the fatal flaw of man, where we believe that we are, it's an arrogance. It's like we believe we're more intelligent than the gods,
Yeah.
or we don't trust them fully. And Hades sees his hubris and is like, I'm going to let you do this as an opportunity to overcome that fear and that mistrust. And I feel this so strongly from Pluto at an astrological level that Pluto is giving us opportunities to overcome the shadow. And it's not forceful, it's actually very patient and receptive. And so Orpheus descends into the underworld, finds Eurydice, but the how to say condition that he can actually get her all the way out is Orpheus has to walk out of the underworld and never look back. He has to trust Hades
Mm.
that Eurydice is behind him. And if he fucking looks back, she will die forever, right? And so it is this like, it's a test, but it's also an opportunity for him to overcome what we might consider to be like his mistrust of the divine, right? And he walks all the way out, all the way out. He's facing forward. We feel the tensity. And right as he's at the threshold to leave the underworld. And he takes a moment and he fucking looks back. And he lets his fear and his mistrust overcome him and loses Eurydice forever. And to me, it's like, and Hades is like fucking rooting for him. He's like, dude, I gave you my word.
We've been
Like
rooting
that,
for you.
yes. And this, I feel this though in like some of the teachings of Pluto as well, is that like, and this is what I've really had to learn from Pluto in how much of a fucking catalyst it is. Excuse my French, but like the way that the pulling up of shadow material to not see that as a punishment. And I feel
Yeah.
so often people see that like they're being punished by God when these energies come up. And that to me is the hubris, is like, no, no, you're being given an opportunity to grow. What if Pluto wants you to grow and come into such deep relationship with your depth and your truth that you overcome fear? And yet we see it as this kind of like I won't use a generalization, but I see it in myself and people I'm close to that they're like, why me? And that it is this forgetting I feel that like
Yeah.
no, what if these forces are conspiring with your growth and not against it? But it's daunting, and there's a certain constitutional like strength of spirit that is required, like Orpheus, to make it through those initiations, you know? You could say the same for the Persephone myth in many ways, you know? However we feel about the capturing of Persephone, to me, there's a degree in which Hades knew that in order for the maiden to become the queen, there must be a descent. There must be
Mhm.
this, in some ways, an act of violence, an initiation. You know, I think about it in the way you connected it to Venus, that like Venus is born of violence. Venus is
Yeah.
born of like,
Yep.
right? So there are these themes where it's like the birth of violence is also like the birth of truth or there's something there of and it's again not to glamorize the real intensity and pain that is embedded within these stories, but that's also the nature of this reality. Like we can't avoid it. And I think that Pluto is so generous to present us with that truth in a way that really does, I feel, want us to grow and um not just try to avoid our suffering for all of our time here on earth, you know? So I just see so much initiation in these myths, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly think. I mean, Uranus also has an initiating. I mean, okay, Uranus has more of an awakening quality,
Yeah.
which is also an initiation in and of itself. Pluto does so certainly through a more violent
Yeah.
means.
Yeah.
And that can be different for everyone.
Yeah.
I think it's for me the whole myth around Persephone is also very much tied to Venus retrograde story
And
and and kind of the what was I trying to say? But it's very much linked for me to like Virgo as well. And Venus has its fall in the sign of Virgo. And for me, Virgo is very much because it's a sign that's the Virgin. But for
yeah.
me, Virgo is also very much everything that, and that's kind of linked in that story where it's like, who were you before you lost your innocence? And what? Because that is oftentimes when we lose that innocence, there is always this grappling of like, how can I get back to that? Like where everything was so untouched and I didn't know about the horrors of the world and when that's Pluto.
Yeah.
And there is no going back, quite frankly.
Yes.
There is no going back. There is very much this quality of when you're going th through hell, or I guess in this way we can say the underworld. When you're going through the underworld, keep going, like keep going
Yes.
through it,
Yes.
and don't look back. Don't do that mistake of looking back, because there is no looking back. It's what is the quote that I read before? Otherwise, there's a if I stay here, there's a going in my staying, and if I go, there's a staying in my going.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I think that what you're speaking to is so profound because in many ways too, like I don't I I'm not a fan of this capturing of Persephone. I think it's
Yeah.
abrasive, but I also think that like, there's a quote, I'm not going to remember it, but there's a quote of what Hades says to Persephone where he's basically like, you can leave if you want to. You can leave
Yeah, yeah.
whenever you want, but I will make sure that the people worship you forever. There's actually an extreme veneration that he has of her that makes me think that there is a degree to which like this this capturing is actually like he knows it's necessary for her to come into that maturation. And I see it too in like the myth of Inanna, right? Where she must move through this descent in order to retrieve the facet of herself that has been living in exile or,
Mm.
these fragmented parts of ourselves. It's a psychological process. And I'm sure all of us have had our own catabasis in this way before, where we must descend to retrieve the parts of us that make us the most true. Like that which lives in the shadows to me is like the root of reality. Like that's the most real shit there is in there. And so it is to me, there's something about the power retrieval. Like there's an incredible myth in one of the translations of Inanna's descent that is like, quiet Inanna, the ways of the underworld are perfect. They are not to be questioned. And there's something in this that's just like the chilling reality, like, yes, in how Uranian awakenings come from like above and like
Yeah.
descending on us. There's something interesting about how for Pluto's initiations, we have to descend into the reality of this material world and the carnage and the suffering of the great below. That it's like you're in a body and you will die, and one day
Yeah.
like you will return and you cannot avoid it. And so may you come to peace with this so that it doesn't eat you alive. You know, like for me, it's this generosity of like, may you know the truth so that you can inhabit it and not spend your life running from it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
That makes 100% sense. It's I think it's yeah, because right, Hades is always here. It's the unseen one. And that's I think a lot of mysticism talks
Mm.
about or a lot of spiritual or religious practices rooted in mysticism
Yeah.
is about kind of constantly going to these places, like confronting yourself with the fact that you can die any second, every day, because that actually makes you be able to live life more fully.
Oh, that's it.
That's the fact. That's the
That's
whole
it.
point of this for this journey is that you can actually live a more fuller life because you're not running away from that.
Right. Right.
So many
Yeah.
people live in these illusions where they're like running away from the fact that things will die, and then we so like like touch around it as if it's this most touchy subject ever. And then when it comes, it's like extremely devastating. And again, by no means I'm trying to say that it's like not devastating or anything.
Right.
Uh, but I think it's more painful for the living than it is for the dead at the end of the day. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so there is Hades wants to help you to live a more full life where you appreciate it because when you realize that death can come knocking at your door every second, you're actually going to make sure you live your life until you get to
Yeah.
that point.
And yeah, we see this. I mean, it's like the touching story of anyone. I when I was studying to be a death doula, I had to watch many processes of folks that had a terminal illness and knew they were going to die. And we see this. I mean, we even saw this if you saw Come See Me in the Good Light with Andrea Gibson and how moving that was for people. It's like they knew they were going to pass, and so and we see this all the time. This is my point. Is like there is an imminence to it that we actually most often feel inspired by when we see people embracing their mortality
Hmm.
in a way that honors the preciousness because it's, yeah, in that same way, it's slipping through our fingers. Um, and that's where I think, lots of folks who have strong Pluto signatures can make other folks uncomfortable. I'm not speaking from experience because there's a sense that like I don't know. I'll just speak very plainly. Like, I am way more interested in telling the truth and living in alignment with the kind of commanding quality that it is than spending my life in a disillusionment or disassociative state, you know? And people like oftentimes don't want to look at it, and I have compassion for it because it's hard. It requires us to really stay with the fear of our own mortality. But yeah, I think that that's what I've had to learn the hard way is like not uh, we live in a death phobic culture. So in that same way, we kind of live in a truth phobic culture to certain degrees. And we're all just like, no, no, I don't see it. No, no, I'm fine. And I'm like, no, you're not. And I love you and I want you to grow. So I'm going to tell you the truth, even if you vilify me for it. And I've learned how to do that in a skillful way in my adulthood. But when I was a little kid, I was like, oh, just a nightmare because I wanted everyone to look, you know. There's a kind
Yeah.
of commanding quality. Yeah. And that's intense. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I fully get you. That is and I would say that that is also a bit of the like Saturn quality like warped in all of this as well,
Yep.
where I like to often imagine myself. That's gonna sound so weird. It's not that I constantly imagine myself that, but like when I'm doing things in my life, I imagine myself being on my deathbed and being like, will I regret that I did this or that I didn't do this?
Yes, yes.
And for me, that is for me a practice, well, with Saturn, but also with Pluto in a way of
Mm.
living a more true and fulfilled life. Because my worst nightmare is really just like living an untruthful life and like avoiding the fact that we could die at any moment. And sure, as you said, right, it is a bit intense.
Yeah.
For some people, it is a bit intense because I've definitely come across where I'm like, like I need to tell you this right now. And like, there's also obviously a truth to like Saturn and like t things take time. And like, like you can't expedite the process of wine taking its time to become wine. And you can't like rush
Yeah.
this process either. So it's a bit of a, yeah, it's a play.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of Ram Dass's quote here, like you can do it like it's a great weight on your shoulders or it's like it's a dance. And you kind of have to learn the dance here between like when
Mm,
is it important to be here for
yeah.
these moments and when are you in a process that takes time and maturation and you kind of need to be patient and all of that. And I think also Jupiter chimes in, which there's a lot of faith required to being like, I'm gonna trust that it's gonna get revealed to me in like the right moments and that I'm gonna know like when I'm in a process of letting something mature and reveal itself and when is it like urgent and it's really like I need to pick up that phone and I don't know, I need to tell this person this thing.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love what you're speaking. I love that you weave in Saturn because I'm thinking about how, Hades is Kronos's eldest
Yeah.
son. So there's something about that, like death being the first, or the one, the all receiver, the death bringer, who is the first of born of time in this way. Oh, there's such a beauty and a poetry to that. Yeah.
Okay, everyone, we're back from a small little break. We're going to talk next about the qualities of Pluto, which we have been interweaving throughout this whole talk, but I think it's worth it dwelling on a few of them in a more in-depth Pluto word way. So I'm just kind of gonna like list them and then I don't know if we're gonna dissect each of the words, but we're gonna kind of like go into them. So, associations with Pluto is it's the planet of breakdowns, destruction and creation, impulse towards regeneration and transformation, purification and purging, but also brutal and ruthless behaviors and driving obsessive energies. So there's with every planet there's I don't really like to use this word, but like a light and a shadow side of things, or a more pleasant or unpleasant side. That's maybe my preferred way of putting it.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, that's quite a list, isn't it?
It
And
is,
and it's all of that. It's all of that. It's so interesting because yeah, in many ways I feel Pluto has always been both for me. And it's in the same way that we were talking about it earlier, um, where those experiences of regeneration or of what I feel like at times can be a liberatory process, it literally feels like you're dying. It feels like you're being taken apart. It makes me think about um, the myth of Osiris. I do tend to connect a bit with Pluto, another kind of like god of the underworld, but his disintegration, right? Like this fragmentation we see in Osiris being taken apart to be put back together again. But it, like I said earlier, it's always the reminder that you will be put back together. Don't you? Do not fear. But, in some ways, it's like if you can withstand the intensity of that disintegration, because it's not an overnight process. It's this like ongoing process. So yeah, I'm curious if you want to like if we should move through these different facets kind of one by one and muse on them for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have, I mean, the first word is breakdowns.
Mhm.
I think certainly breakdowns can also be associated with other planets. I think it's also like with I often like to actually use it with Uranus, where I'm like, oh, the line between breakdown and breakthrough is very thin with Uranus, depending on how it's hitting your chart. I think with Pluto, it's more crises moments,
Mhm.
where it almost, yeah, brutally can force you into transformation. Like that's definitely also Pluto in life and in personal transits, where you
Mhm.
almost feel like I gotta do this now, like it
Yeah.
almost like forced surrender, and that's definitely not pleasant. And that's also like, that's the after effects. I think Pluto also talks a lot about, these moments are essentially moments that can create trauma.
Mhm.
Because trauma is not just the moment of impact, it's everything that happens or doesn't happen, as a matter of fact, afterwards. And that's, I think, the process of Pluto is right, like it takes a second for a va vase to break, but it's like, what do you do after with the pieces, right? Takes a long time to
Great.
piece them back together to find them, and that's kind of Pluto, and that's also, again, I mean, kind of part of the myth, right? Like that when Persephone gets, well, raped into the underworld,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it takes a while until you piece all of that together, and it's not going to be the same vase again,
Right.
even
Right.
after that. So.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, and there's something there about the kind of like reckoning that comes with it, you know? And I feel this is something that oftentimes I experience, but I also have heard a lot in astrological praxis about like people with strong Pluto or strong Scorpio signatures as well, but this sense of extremes, you know, which at face value, it's like, sure, yeah, it might seem extreme to make these like big decisions overnight and move into what I see as like a true death and rebirth process. But in some ways, I feel that there is a recognition there that we come to a head in our own growth processes where it's like you either can move in this totally other direction or still be mired in like the past experience or past ways of being. And so for me, the like transformation, the breakdown processes can look like extremes at a face value, but it's also like that's sometimes the necessity of growth is like moving in this really sometimes all or nothing way. I'm calling myself out there. And like the impulse to burn it all down and start over is not new, but I do find with folks that have strong Plutonian signatures, that's a common impulse is like all or nothing mentality. Um, and there is, I would make a case for how comfortable those folks are with death because they're like, no, I'm literally willing to just start over tomorrow. And it
Mhm.
might seem impulsive. And I often get the reflection from other people in my life that they just don't understand. Like they're like, it's hard to catch up with how willing some folks are to like die unto themselves so that they can move in totally new directions. But it's like, how courageous that also is, I think is worth saying. You know, because we're often so mired in, and stuck in ourselves that that is easier said than done to like wake up and really implement the change you want to see in your life. So it's like breakdowns and breakthroughs sometimes are required for one another. I really love that fine line between the two. Yeah. And that destruction and creation piece right there, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
100% agree. It's definitely, I can definitely also see like Mars's quality like being fused into all of this
Mhm.
as well. I think it's I also think the line between destruction and creation can be quite thin as well.
Totally.
Depending on where you are in life. And it's oftentimes when we're not creating, we are destroying, and it's usually ourselves that we are destroying in the process. And that can also be like the extremeness of Pluto can also be, and that sometimes is also a bit of like the Scorpio struggle, where it's like you're like, I need that hit. It's almost like a dopamine of
Yeah.
like that you
Yeah.
need to get, where it's like it's harder to just like kind of simmer and enjoy the things in life. It like almost feels threatening. Uh,
Stop.
you're like called out.
Yeah.
So that can definitely also be a signature for people that have like strong natal Pluto placements, where it's like, okay, maybe it doesn't always need to be a crazy
Right.
transformation.
Right.
Because it can really be like a hit like that you're searching. Like not everyone's addicted to substances. Some people are addicted to these things, and that can
So real.
also be yeah, like where are you doing it for the purpose of just like getting a hit and destroying and creating, and where is it like constructive?
Right.
Yes, I think that's that's a question for sure.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, something that well, you said these things take time, right? And I also want to remind people that Pluto transits take time. There's you usually, especially now that Pluto is so slow, there's sometimes Pluto transit that take up like they're 5 years in the making until they like get in engagement range and out of engagement range with a natal planet. Which is, if you have any placements in Aquarius, you're going to get a Pluto conjunction eventually at some point. And it's probably going to last around 5 years until it's fully over. And that is quite the long time for a transit to last.
Yes. And I love the connection to this image you brought of the vase shattering because in a way I feel like it's there's the moment of impact, right? There's the moment where Pluto does destroy our for me it's not that Pluto's destroying something, it's that our stories about whatever that thing is, whether it's ourselves or something in our life, the mirror's being shattered, right? Like it's a
Mm-hmm.
moment where our perception of reality is being destroyed. And then we have to go about making sense of it, integrating and recohering now that our prior understanding has changed, right? And there is this kind of moment where I feel so much of it really does deal with like the fragility of our ego because really like
Mm-hmm.
we are made of stories. Our whole reality, our sense-making faculty is a storytelling faculty, right? And what I feel Pluto's really doing is it's like the pin that keeps our story together is being removed and it's opening itself up into the underworld, into like the catacombs of what's really beneath what we see at a face value in our world, right? We're like, I think you use the word excavation. It really is like we're excavating the root system of what we take at face value about ourselves and the world. And that is, it's deeply psychological. It's often like it requires a kind of subterranean, subconscious process. And so much of Pluto's work is that long, kind of sometimes grueling process, years long, of putting the pieces back together, right? The actual destruction is, it can be a single moment
Yes.
of, yeah. And then it's like the real work of Pluto is that recoherence, I feel, and like how we start to see the truth that our reality was built from in a way. Um, I don't know if any of that made sense, but it feels like that.
Totally.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Absolutely makes
good.
sense. It's sometimes what we can see like transit wise,
Yeah.
Mercury is opposing Pluto or squaring Pluto, and all of a sudden you get hit with that truth. Like somebody says something, or just like take Venus up. Sorry, that's like just the example I'm thinking
Yeah.
of. But like you're in a relationship and all of a sudden this person's like, "Hey, I actually like I had an affair. Like
Yes.
I'm cheating on you." And your whole idea
Mhm.
completely shatters and falls apart. You're reconstructing every single word this person said all of a sudden, everything they did during that time, everything about your reality. And you can also kind of like throw Neptune in there as well, because Neptune kind of has that effect as well in certain moments. Um,
Mm.
but it's also definitely like the excavation part that you afterwards go through.
Mhm.
That's Pluto. That's
Right.
Hades. And I think one important thing is to just not fall into the trap where, and that's like the obsessive part of Pluto, where you become so obsessed with excavating, where there's like, what are you like you lost the plot of why you even started the
Yeah.
process of excavation in the first place.
Yes. Well, yeah, and I think I'm just gonna call myself out here so fully. Like I really am because I see it in the way that Pluto is like Moon, Venus, Mercury, like there's so much like digging. My dear ones in my life have often used this phrase lovingly with me, where it's like, oh, she's got the shovel out, and they like people know when I'm about to start digging. And it's like and some of the reflections over the years, especially in like my very deep relationships with folks, is like there's also a need to just let things be good. Because I
Yeah.
think when there's so much Plutonian energy, it's almost as if we're always there's an obsession or a fixation with trying to understand the root network beneath the surface that, like you're saying, we lose the plot of just actually enjoying life as it is and not always needing to dig for why it is and like what we're not seeing. Again, with that Hades piece, I feel so much of Pluto can be actually fixated on what we can't see. And it's like looking for what we can't see
Mm.
as a way of um, because the things that we can't see have the most power. The fear and the potential, and even sometimes power we can't see. It's not self-evident. But that's where so much of the kind of force of it comes from. And I will make a case for this, though. In the same way that Pluto, when it's aspecting those personal planets, it can be, or I'll just say the inner planets and transits as well, there can be like these big moments where truth is revealed or there's a kind of emergence that comes to light. I also feel that there's a way it can be gentle. Like I see this a lot in the role that I have played in relationships with others, where I feel like my Venus-Pluto square is almost like this. I'll say black mirror, but sometimes it's a mirror for other people to see their own processes and their own selves really
Mm.
clearly. And that can be really beautiful to like provide a space where folks have this kind of self-realization that sets them free. And it can be intense, like it's super triggering also. I've been um, understandably vilified by lots of folks for how intense it is that Pluto is just serving as a catalyst. It's not me, but it is that
Yeah.
energy that's like poking at what has been kind of out of view. So I just feel that catalyst over and over again. And I love that catalyst has that root kata in it that has to do with some kind of defense,
Yeah.
you know? Whew, yeah,
Tonic, or
tonic.
however you say. I think you say tonic realm, right? Am I pronouncing that right? But that's basically kind of another world for describing the underworld or the subconscious. And I think Pluto actually also has a lot to do with the subconscious, which we haven't brought up in this context yet, but it's 100% here as well, because that is the unseen realm. That's why it's called the subconscious. And I think Pluto, again, I think actually Pluto has this quality where it can be pretty wise about what it does bring to the surface. And you kind of mentioned that before as well. I don't think Pluto is necessarily here to overwhelm us, even though certainly that's what it can feel like.
Right.
There's no denying that. But it's also, in a way, sometimes it can be freeing, right? Because if we just take that example again of like the having an affair in a relationship, I would say you're probably in the end, you're grateful it came to light than living with the illusion your whole life.
That's it. That's the liberatory process,
Yeah.
baby. Yeah, and it's hard though because at face value, again, it comes back for me of like at face value, people feel like they're being punished. And it's like
Yes.
you're honestly in some ways it's like you're being liberated from the illusion, but it feels like we're being punished, And sometimes truth in that way is really hard to reckon with. Um, yeah. Yeah, and there's so much there about like the subconscious too and the ways that so much, like I said before, I feel so much of like the truth of our reality actually exists in the subconscious. That's really what's running the show because our
Yes.
fears and desires are just breeding under there and like they're not until we become conscious of them, they are really running the show. And so at times when our fear or the root of our desires, which to me connects to some of the kind of taboo quality with that Plutonian principle, like it's the stuff that we don't see or don't want to talk about, but when it's
Yep.
revealed, we become kind of conscious agents of change in our life. It's trying to again allow us to be in our seat of creative agency and to say like, okay, what do I want to do about this? I really feel Pluto wants us to grow in that way. That's like when you become aware of things, it's no longer reactive. It's now
Mm,
active,
yeah.
you know? And that's huge. That's where all your power is actually, you know? So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Carl Jung quote of until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that's certainly Pluto wisdom. And nobody ever said it's easy. Nobody ever said it's comfortable.
Mm-mm.
Uh, but it is oftentimes necessary. And I think it's with all same with like Saturn, Mars transits. There aren't pleasant transits, but I would say in the grand scheme of things, probably at some point in your life, you're going to be like, actually, you know what? I'm grateful this happened because otherwise I would have been living in a sort of bubble or illusion, or this would have been running my life. But again, it does take time and yeah, during that phase of where you feel like you're being punished, it's certainly not a fun phase or cycle to go through.
Mhm.
I think we talked a bit about this in the Neptune episode because Neptune is like the realm where like, oh wait, it stopped me. I'm talking about Neptune and it is like fuck no.
Classic.
Anyhow, okay, we're back. We're back. So, because like with Uranus, even though it's an outer planet, we're like still in the realm where like a lot of us will probably get a Uranus return if we make it up till 80. But with Neptune, we enter the realm of there's no none of us is getting a Neptune return. None of us is certainly getting a Pluto return. And some of us are getting like a Pluto sextile and maybe
Mhm.
a square.
Mhm.
So it's these transits that we do get from Pluto to our natal planets are like a once in a lifetime thing. You're never getting them ever again. Like, let's just say if you have your moon in Aquarius, like you're getting this conjunction only this time. This is only happening for you and every other person that has their moon in Aquarius. But I think that's good to know because it means that it is very poignant and specifically like meant for your life experience, your karmic blueprint of your chart because you're not gonna get all of this. Like some of us are never gonna get any I mean, or not these specific transits from Pluto. Like definitely in some way, shape, or form, Pluto will touch your chart eventually, if it's through conjunctions or sextiles or trines or squares or oppositions. But they are, yeah, once in a lifetime opportunity to go through.
Yeah, I love that so much. I've thought about it a lot with folks that I've read for recently that are Aquarius risings. And I'm like, damn, I'll never get to live through Pluto on my ascendant again.
Yeah.
Like it was there right when I was born, and then it's still, it's still separating even in my natal chart. But there's something about that where it's like, damn, y'all really signed up for some pretty intense rebirth processes to be walking that path. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it comes down to something that is it's so important, I think, to speak about in the fold of everything we've shared about Pluto, that is like we don't necessarily live in a culture that has maps anymore for those kinds of initiatory processes.
Mm.
Like
Mhm.
so many of our myths are maps, but I don't think that I mean I wasn't necessarily raised on myths that helped me to understand like descent and underworld excavation psychological processes. And I see that a lot in folks that have either strong natal Pluto or are moving through transits where amount, like the degree of emotional intensity that is occurring like inside of our body. Because again, this is like, to me, it's unseen in the way that it's like the conditions are changing and we're experiencing it at such a somatic level. I see that there is this nature of overwhelm that can come from it, where those obsessive, compulsive, fixation-based like habits can really like amplify because our system doesn't know what to do with all of that energy. And it's like
Mm,
taking us apart. And I see it in myself. I have a pretty strong like addictive personality, and I've struggled with addiction, and I'm very open about it because what I've learned over the years is like so much of addiction, whether it's to a substance, whether it's like pattern fixation, whatever it is, it's too much to be in our embodied experience. The emotions, maybe the trauma that we've experienced, whatever it is that's happening inside of the individual becomes so strong and so intense that the addiction is actually serving to help us relieve some of that intensity in our experience and like almost, how do you say, like offload some of it to fixate on this thing. And sometimes with substances, it's actually like somatically allowing for a release. Um, but I say that to kind of normalize that, like, yes, Pluto does have this association with addiction because of the amount of emotional intensity that one is experiencing, that they're trying to like offload, right? And that pattern, for me, there's grief in like we don't know how to hold our people through levels of emotional intensity in that way. I think that our generation and now there's a lot more like psychological resource for it. But I even see it in like working with folks, that have like Irish ancestry and this addiction
yeah.
to alcohol. It's like we're not able to deal with what's happening inside of us. And so we try to externalize that intensity and offset it. And it's sad. It's like we don't know how to tend to those strong Pluto constitutions, or those transits. Like how do we make a map through it where there is I found it helpful to be in this kind of like purgative process, whether it's through ecstatic dance or
Yeah.
working with kind of like offloading it in my body, like letting it move rather than getting it all pent up. And so it's like it's not to be feared necessarily, but it is like how do we really tend to ourselves and one another when that intensity makes its way through our life, um, and love it well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a good point. Also, sorry, my like phone fell down before that, so I was like briefly picking it up. Shattering Pluto moment. I mean, my phone didn't shatter. You don't
Yeah,
don't worry,
good.
guys. But um, yeah, I think yeah, I do agree. I think we have shitty coping mechanisms for
Yeah,
intensity, for just intense experiences. I
good.
think we're very good at having coping mechanisms to calm down, but that for me is not regulation. I have found that
Right.
this is what a lot of people think regulation is to just like calm down. And it's like, no, it's actually kind of also learning how to be in the intensity. And
Yeah.
we are not equipped to hold that at all. Also not in, as a former psychiatry nurse, like the institutions aren't equipped either. Like
Yes,
to be
yes,
quite honest, it's not happening there either. It's like
yeah.
somebody gets intense, well, you get medicated, you get put in isolation. Like there's no real coping mechanisms to
Right.
actually like pull someone through that experience. And then I get why there's such a huge fear of all of that because everything we always see is just like the most extreme version of that. And like
Right.
when we feel it, then it's like, oh, it's not good. Like you
Right.
need to calm down. You need to get sedated. You need to get, the worst
Mhm.
part of this is like I'm like, why isolation? Like why put someone in fucking isolation? Because it's gonna teach the person and the nervous system that this is something that you can only go through alone,
Oof.
perhaps even re-traumatize the person even more. And I'm just like, I don't like it. I don't like the coping mechanisms or, well, the lack thereof
Yeah.
that we have societally for these experiences because, and again, and we come back to, the the fact that we're not looking at the subconscious, and and then it gets brought forward with all these extremes
Mhm.
of people going completely bonkers,
Yes,
which
yes.
I'm like, it shouldn't actually have to be that. Like that does not need to specifically happen.
Right,
Um, yeah, and that's Pluto too. That is
right.
the extremely destructive quality of Pluto there too.
Right. Yeah, and it's like there's just so much. It's an interesting thing to consider how much Pluto and Neptune have a relationship even astronomically, because I feel the way that like we do spend so much time trying to numb these intensities. Like we don't at a cultural level at least have a lot of capacity for intensity. We're like you're saying, we have an association that regulation looks like quiet, peaceful, stoic, and really like that can be a freeze state, and sometimes regulation looks like, I mean, I share this, like I was talking to you about it before. I've been an ecstatic dance facilitator for like 7 years, and it's because I fucking need to do that. I need to like let all of that energy in my system like purge, and for me there's so many people that come into that space that also feel quite Plutonian to me, that are like, thank God we have a place where we can do like a primal howl, because that's what we actually need is a primal
Yep.
howl. um and so normalizing, because so what I'm trying to relay here, I guess, is that when we see the qualities of Pluto and we immediately kind of maybe vilify some of them as being like too much, too intense, too whatever, it's like we're not able to really meet them where they're at, and again, right size them, because there's something really instinctual and about the nature of our reality that is a lot. It is intense. Mortality and being human is so much to bear. And so it's like I would rather like talk about that and how to tend to that well than avoid it. And I think that that's so much of our kind of like numbing and avoidance is like we just don't want to look at how real it actually is in some capacities. And unfortunately, like with the example you're giving of people that aren't being taken care of in their intensity, I think that some of those maybe ruthless behaviors or the explosive qualities that come out is from so much of that energy being
Mm,
repressed. And it's like pushing a beach ball underwater. The beach ball
yep.
is not just going to disappear. It's gonna like become harder to contain and then it bursts. And I definitely feel I've learned the hard way from my own Pluto energies that it's like I can't do that. I cannot repress because it will come out, It's so psychological. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's usually extremely destructive
Yes.
when it bursts, and you sometimes it's inevitable, and
Yeah.
it kind of happens, and that's the cathartic moment in and of itself.
Right.
But I would say a lot of times, and this is also how we can kind of be in relationship with Pluto, is by actively seeking out these um, well, cathartic experiences, yeah, where we have a safe container to do so, be it ecstatic dancing or like drumming, like that's also and whatnot. I don't know. I was at years ago, I was doing this. It was just like a 1 day anger workshop, but
Yeah.
just having a place where
Mhm.
this was tended to and I could like go there
Mhm.
was just like wow.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was so much better than doing it alone. And yeah, I think it's extremely important. And I think everybody that has gone through that
Mhm.
with themselves has less of a fear when it happens to other people because it's not as threatening as it probably looks like. Like I know I was when I was working as a psychiatric nurse and I didn't have that part yet.
Mhm.
Because I was like doing that when I was very young because we have that system here in Switzerland. Like sometimes I wish I would have come to that later on because like my coping mechanisms were horrible back then. Uh, but back then I was like a lot more scared of these things
Yeah.
happening because it was just so like it almost felt like I'm losing control. And so, but I get like I get why people feel so scared of that because it taps into their own
Mm.
fear of losing control, of losing their mind, of becoming insane and whatnot. And it's quite healing experiencing these cathartic moments in a place where you are actually like safe and held and you can kind of go insane if you want to put it that way, without that meaning that, oh, I'm actually going to lose my mind. Like it might be a bit mind loosening, but it's you're not going to die, you know? Like you're going to come
Yeah.
out alive. You're going to be transformed by this. And it's not something to be ashamed of. I think that's the biggest part of all of that is that when it happens in these containers, like, you know, being involuntarily put into a clinic and then isolated because you're just screaming your lungs out and then having a psychotic episode is a very different experience than,
Mm.
you know, going through that with, I don't know, people drumming with you through
Yeah,
the
yeah.
screaming. Yeah, we
Beautiful.
really we really do not have the coping mechanisms. But again, there I feel like that could be a whole video essay in and of itself, talking talking about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it essentially it has to start way sooner. I'm like
Mm.
we would have to go back to like childhood and
Yeah.
already give people the skills and everything because
Right.
I it's very hard to change the system from one day
Right.
to another. But I do see the same thing as you do that I do think a lot of people you know, maybe from our generation and younger are seeking out these other well, you know, they're unconventional, but I don't I'm like
Right.
actually this should
They're
be
deeply
conventional.
traditional. Yeah. They're super traditional, right? Like this beautiful passage that gets talked about a lot lately that's like if you went to someone who was a traditional healer and you were sharing about your suffering, they would ask you when's the last time you danced or you sang or
Yeah.
you howled. You know, it's like these are very actually very human levels of our experience, and I think that that's what I feel when I work with Pluto or when I work with Hades is this sense that because like this we're talking about the Lord of all that has been, you know, deemed kind of uncouth and in exile. And I feel this energy of like, no, it really all belongs. Like all of it belongs here. Like your anger, your grief, your rage, your sadness, and your joy can somehow all belong in the same experience. I have a dear friend who is also very Scorpio Pluto, and I'm in a theater troupe with him, and he sent me this beautiful little heart one day and I opened it up and I'll never forget it. The one side of the heart says, "The depth of your joy mirrors the depth of your grief." And that to me, like this, oh, this image of like the heart that can hold it all, I actually
Mhm.
feel it's the invitation from Pluto is like you're 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 more resilient than you think you are. Like, what if you actually do have that capacity to contain the multitudes of this human experience, which is hard. Um, but I think so often, like we rush it off and yeah, we're just not really tending to it well. But yeah, that's always the invitation for me is because there's an othering quality that I see in folks that have strong Pluto energy. It's like they somehow end up living in the fringes or always
Mm.
feeling in exile, always feeling othered like a black sheep. And it's because I've heard this so many times, maybe you have too, where people are they get the reflection that they're too intense. Like just their presence alone is like too intense for others to be around. And I used to call Pluto the shadow magnet because I noticed that just being in the presence of someone with strong Pluto can like bring other people's shit up to the surface. You know, it's like a shadow magnet. And if you don't know how to work with that skillfully, it can be a really othering experience, you know? Um, yeah, yeah.
I definitely have heard of that.
Hmm.
It's a real thing. But as you said, and I think that's well, really the invitation with all planets. I think there's always a way that you can kind of learn to wield the things in your chart to your benefit.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like, okay, Pluto's obsessive qualities, but then like, if you're a therapist, like that's an amazing skill to have because that's exactly what you want to be doing to other people. Uh, and you're actually
Yeah.
going to get paid for it and not villainized for it.
Exactly. And like there's a beautiful way that you really I don't know, even if like I resonate with that and I think that too, especially for folks that maybe aren't therapists but do have strong Pluto, it's like I've had to learn the hard way to not be super forceful about like almost um my commitment to truth historically has been forceful, where I'm like, no, look at it. We have to look, and it's like that's not always the most skillful thing. Sometimes
Mm,
that will make people more avoidant rather than actually want them to grow. And so there's a way that it's like you're talking about this dance, right? Of like how do we more skillfully navigate the shadow magnet and do it with love and do it with like really for me it's like compassion for our humanity that it's scary to do this human thing um that I've learned over the years and if whenever I meet other like strong Pluto people I'm like be gentle with yourself and others and you have big medicine like you have that homeopathic medicine it really is that like that it is purgative in that way um, which can be a real gift at times, like you're saying about the therapists. Like you're helping other people really get free and be liberated, right? Even if it feels like they're dying, which part of them is dying. That's the point, right? It's
yeah.
like that
Yeah.
deconstruction. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's a ton of therapists that, do not do that skillfully. So,
True. Yeah.
so it can, yeah, there's a lot, learning about things and actually doing the things. I know personally, I have only ever felt truly safe doing
Mm.
these processes with people that actually have undergone these processes themselves because I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what you're talking, not do you only know what you're talking about, you're embodying what you're talking about. And I know you can hold me there because you're not scared. Um,
That.
and I'm just saying that again as like from my former work field and so many people working there where I'm just I mean I was one of those too like back then and I was very young but it was just it was not a lived like I was it was a witnessing experience but there was still too much of my own shadow that I did not integrate or look at, which made me scared. In the
Mm.
end, it was a curiosity that piqued me to go there. But then when it started to confront me with my own shadow, it was too much.
Oh.
And I had to step away from that process, right? It essentially led me to have a burnout. Um,
Mm.
and then I had to face my stuff. But again, I mean, there's so many people working in this field, they have no freaking clue. But again, everybody can be useful in some sort of ways in this fields. Um, but I do think, yes, like a skilled therapist, especially somebody going with you through that type of process, ideally is someone that actually has like
Right.
also gone through that process themselves because it's a lot to hold. And I feel like people that haven't, there's always just gonna be like this fear of letting people fully go there because they
Yes.
haven't experienced the death rebirth of that.
Oh, so true. You
Uh,
cannot guide others through the underworld if you do not know the terrain yourself. Like you gotta have known the map, baby. You'll make it out on the other
Yes.
side. Yeah.
Yes. James Hillman talks a lot about this also in
Mm.
this book about that he thinks that therapists should actually constantly be in relationship with Hades. Uh,
Mhm. I
because it's
agree.
just yeah, it's do I have that passage somewhere? I feel like I underlined a few things that he said about that. Uh let
So
me
good.
find that. Oh, well, he says here to be a psychotherapist and work in depth, one must in some way or another cooperate with Hades.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, death is the fundamental fear of the profession, actively working as its fundamental metaphor.
Wow.
Um,
Yes.
yes, and there's a reason. He also says it here, but like at the top of the suicide list of medical specialists are the
Mm.
psychiatrists.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the most important takeaway. There's obviously more,
Mhm.
but that's I do think if you want to work in these professions and do it well, do it truthfully and honestly, it's you better have a relationship with Hades in
Totally.
some
Even
way or
as like a
another.
resource. Yeah, even
Yeah.
to just resource yourself. Like I don't think I could have done so much death work if I wasn't in relationship with what feels to be like the bigger powers that hold it because I'm just a little human. I'm a
Yeah.
fucking mortal, you know? So yeah, it's like how to yeah, how to really honor that what we're talking about is a force much bigger. Like the 248-year cycle, this is so much bigger than our singular life,
Yes.
right? Like that's the truth of it. This is so much bigger than us. Um, it is regeneration in that larger, bigger power sense, I feel. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and there are t bringing it back to natal charts once again. It's
Mhm.
I think what natal charts remind us of sometimes is that it goes beyond death because there have been numerous authors, movie makers, whatnot, other political figures, spiritual figures that get Pluto activations long before they have passed through the natal charts and something pops back up. And that's also the power of that 248-year cycle.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. I just it's humbling because I do feel in some ways Pluto does connect us to a truth bigger than ourselves, not just in a mortality sense, but in the kind of like collective shadow sense.
Yeah.
I've always felt the way that even in Jung's kind of musings on the collective unconscious, I feel sometimes that Pluto has a through line from us into like the collective
Mm,
body or the collective psyche, and that's so it's so much of a dialogue and a call and response. And that when we have these Pluto aspects, it's like those threads of the fates are getting plucked, and part of our own process is like we're not separate from the collective soul in that way. We're a facet and an expression of it. And what I love about Pluto, yeah, I never really knew that um Hades was associated with Thanatos in that way, but it's like, yeah, I feel the web. I feel the way that the fates are kind of playing the strings of life and death and pulling us into those larger processes too. And I find that like pl folks that have strong Pluto in their natal chart sometimes do like they're metabolizing things from the collective soul in a way.
mm,
Like they're digesting a lot of what's happening in the whole as a kind of conduit for catharsis. Um, I used to work a lot with like plant medicines and like specifically purgative medicines. And something that I noticed in people is how much they were not just purging like their own experience, but also lineage experience and
yeah.
collective experience. And that there was what I witnessed is like this connection to the collective soul or that bigger psyche that was moving through them as individuals. And I learned that from Pluto. I'm like, yeah, there is this bigness to the through line, that we can no longer see ourselves as separate from the whole to a certain degree, nor our shadow, because it's so much influenced by culture and the world that we were born into. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was when you were talking about this and we're looking at that 248-year
Mm,
cycle and how again like a lot of karma, be it good or bad,
yeah.
pleasant or unpleasant, gets passed through so many generations
Yeah.
in our family lineage and that's Pluto too. It's the
Mhm.
the connective tissue through that connects us not just to the collective conscious, but also through our family lineage that is long gone in the physical realm, at least, but it's still, here in the spirit realm, if you believe in that, but in
Mhm.
some way, shape, or form, still somehow alive in
Yeah.
our bodies, in our DNA.
Yeah. And I think about that a lot with the kind of topography of the underworld being full of like rivers and
Yeah.
water. Like there's so much water there, and I've often likened it to like the impressions of memory that are held in
Mm.
the river Styx, like the memory of the beloved dead, whether or not you even believe in the spirit world, like all life has made its impression in the collective soul. It is remembered, in those waters. And I feel that this is the kind of current that Pluto does connect us to in that underworld sense, where our subconscious is not just our own. Like what's moving through that part of our being is much bigger than us. And it's mysterious. Like I don't pretend to understand it. I just know that it's
Oh.
like, whoa, it's intense. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Mm.
I fully agree. I fully agree. I mean, one of the points that I'm sorry, I'm bringing a lot of things back to the book, but I think
Yeah.
it's just such a great metaphor. But that also James Hillman talks about in this book, which is a lot about dreams, right? It's called The Dream and the Underworld, and he kind of also opposes Jung and Freud here a bit, which go like heavily into like dream analysis and the fact that it's like, is it even necessary? Like, should we even analyze our dreams because it's just like a sense of like our ego grasping, trying to understand something that maybe shouldn't even be understood.
Yeah.
And shouldn't not in the way of like, oh, I just, like it's just like you don't we don't need to necessarily. Like it's another realm. And we don't need to necessarily combine it with the living realm. It's just
Yes.
another realm.
Yeah.
And there's a different type of logic and time that applies to that. It's not the same sense that we have here in this
Mm.
world. And maybe there is no, and again, we get into like the obsessive qualities of like Pluto here of trying to like excavate everything. And it's like maybe you don't need to. Like,
Yeah.
um, and I'm literally thinking of people that work in in excavation sites as like what is the name of that profession? There's like a name for it's not like excavator, but like
Like a
something like
contractor or something?
no like a geo something, I guess.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, yes, yes. I
But
know
I
what you're
don't
talking about. Yeah.
but I don't know the
Oh, but
name.
oh gosh, now I'm not gonna I know like dinosaur. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Someone
Where
can tell us in the comments.
yeah, tell us in the comments if you know what the actual word is.
Archaeologist.
Archaeologist. Yeah, there was no geo in that, but
No, close.
yeah, archaeologists. Where there's also sometimes I question, especially when it's like on holy sites and stuff, where it's like, should should we do that? Like, should
Yeah.
should we be excavating that, or
Right.
should it just kind of be left in peace in
Yeah.
that realm?
Right. Yeah, that's so real. Yeah, yeah, like letting the it really is like letting the dead rest and and like t tending to it all well. Yeah. I see it in the same way that like we don't necessarily have proper death rites anymore. I mean, so much of my work these days is like ancestor work and death tending, and we just collectively really lost our way with how to like truly let the dead rest and tend to them well, which requires a sense of closure. It all feels connected somehow. Like I just feel like Hades is like, what are y'all doing? Like we're waking up the dead and yeah, it's unsettled
Oh.
everywhere. Yeah.
I know. I mean, there's like a whole conversation that we could have with AI and everything and trying to
Mm.
once again, make the dead livable and not let them rest. I
Yeah.
fully agree.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Mm.
That's it. Is there one of the like words that I mean, I feel
Oh.
like we talked about all of them, but is there one of the words that
Mm.
you want to talk more about or
Let's see. I mean, I think I am interested in I think it's worth mentioning this piece about the obsessive energy. Um, and I think it goes a little bit with what I was talking about in addiction earlier, but you spoke to it in how this fear of losing control,
Mhm.
right? Which to me, is hidden underneath that I feel is like a fear of dying, a fear of death. Even if it's like death to the version of ourself that we knew the moment before we like lose control. And sometimes I feel that the kind of obsessive energies that Pluto gets associated with there is like this desire to control and have a false semblance of control in life because of that fear of death. It just also, obsession does feel quite psychological, but there is at times, I've worked at a spirit level with folks, it feels like there's something else going on there, where there's an energy that can kind of like
Mm.
take us over. Call it a possession state or just like emotional whatever. That's just a curiosity that I have with Pluto sometimes when we think about its connection to not only death, but also the beloved dead and the spirit world in that way. It's like yeah, some of the ways that those energies can come into our lived experience and create fixation or these kind of obsessive drives. And I don't, again, it's not something that I pretend to understand. It's more just an observation that I have with that Plutonian aspect. I feel it's like the need to control something or the desire to sometimes. But yeah, that's really the only other thing. And I would say in terms of purification and purging. I learned this the hard way working with those underworld energies, but there is a density to it, right? Like when you're working with these energies, it's like almost pulling you, pulling you, pulling you into the subterranean. And I
Mhm.
feel the need for purification or purging practices to like make sure that that energy actually moves and is actually metabolized and like becomes compost. Otherwise, you can really get mired in it. And I think that that's
Yeah.
where sometimes like maybe those fixation or addictive behaviors come from is like getting stuck in the density. And so, oh my God, so much cleansing needed, I think, for working with Pluto. Like really. Catharsis is a good word for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and it's also I think applicable to all the outer planets.
Mm.
Some are incredibly intense when they touch points in our charts or with transits, but especially when they touch sensitive points in our charts. And luckily that's why they are kind of like once in a lifetime experience that we are getting. Because I'm always like, imagine Pluto is constantly transiting your Mercury, like,
Mm-mm.
fuck no.
No.
I mean, I know there's people with that constellation in their birth chart, like, don't get me wrong, but just
Yes.
like from a transit perspective, it's it's intense being there, and
Yeah.
it's I don't think a lot of these experiences are meant to last a lifetime.
Right.
They come into our lives for a certain period and then they stay there, and then we work with them, and then we move on to the
Yeah.
next thing. Like Pluto is not meant to,
Exactly.
you would not be able to live your life if you would constantly be purging and cleansing.
Nope. Nope. That's so real. Yeah.
But it can sometimes feel, it's like you go back to the office on Monday and you're like, I've just undergone the most crazy experience and now I gotta type words in my laptop. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
That's
certainly how it can feel sometimes. And everybody's just looking at you like, what?
yeah. Yep. I really feel that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess eventually we also have to let go of Pluto, once it separates from our charts in specific ways, which can, yeah, sometimes also be hard. You mentioned that sometime along the journey, right? But we can get really like stuck in of like, oh, and like I think especially with trauma, and I think after that we can, well, it
Mm.
depends. But it's we can get stuck in that like high stress survival trauma thing where because Pluto transits they make us feel alive. They're
Mhm.
but it's it's not, you're not meant to like stay there forever. You're like also meant to go and live life and kind of like engage with mundane life, which is kind of boring and repetitive, but that's like also part of it. I think that's also that can also be difficult in its own way of like kind of like saying goodbye to Pluto and being like, okay, not
Hmm.
everything has to constantly always be so intense. Because I for
Yeah.
sure know folks with Pluto where it's just like a constant like seeking of that like and I need to go to another ayahuasca retreat and I need to go to another like this and this and it's like
Oh my
okay, it's
gosh.
okay, it's
Yeah.
okay. You don't need to purge
Let it
anymore.
be good. Let it be good. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's it. I really appreciate that. I feel like I needed to to a certain degree, I'll call myself out. But it's like you spoke to like looking for that hit early on and it is real. I feel like there's almost this sense of like proving to yourself that you're real, that you're alive. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
the desire to feel your mortality sometimes that is like
Oh
looking
yeah.
for these extreme processes. Yeah. And it's like, are you enjoying yourself? Like also to a certain degree, just enjoy your life. That's part of it too. Um, yeah. Yeah. Oh, Pluto.
Fully agreed. Yeah, well I was wondering if you want to talk
Mm,
we talked like we kind of like brought it in a few times now, but
mm,
about well maybe it's worth mentioning Pluto retrogrades, which is
mm,
happens every year, but then also a bit more maybe on like Pluto cycles with outer planets
mm,
or with inner planets.
mm.
Not going to touch on all of them,
Yeah.
but just we already kind of gave a few examples of maybe, Pluto Mercury. Like Pluto Mercury is definitely an intense one, especially when it comes to like obsessive thoughts and our processes. Um, yeah, to what I want to say about Pluto retrogrades, which is really with every planet from Jupiter onwards is their retrograde basically half a year. Like Pluto's retrograde like half a year. It's really it's not something to bang your head around like, with like a Venus retrograde is much more special.
Mm,
But I would say with the outer planets, the stations can be quite loud,
mm,
depending on, especially if they're like involved with another planet. These moments are usually loud. Otherwise, Pluto is in a sign for so long, it's almost unnoticeable if it's retrograde or direct. You're gonna notice it mostly personally if, again, let's just say Pluto is going over your, I don't know, Saturn in Aquarius or something. Like you're gonna like that's probably gonna be noticeable with the retrograde and direct period. Other than that, I personally wouldn't pay so much attention
mhm,
to the
mhm.
retrogrades from the outer planets unless they're touching natal points or involved in the stations with some other planets.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting thing with Pluto, especially because during a retrograde, it's really only moving a matter of degrees, right?
Yeah,
It's like a very small
two,
window,
3 degrees.
which, right, but that also like it does intensify, like you're
Yes.
saying, if there are any natal placements there, you're really getting the scalpel, But I think that other than that, I'll be honest, I've thought about it for the past few years, and I personally don't notice the Pluto retrograde, except for really like the few days around the stationing,
Yes.
But
Exactly.
other than that, because I feel Pluto is such a kind of backdrop, and not in a dismissive way, but in a way that it is like the peripheral conditions of our life that aren't as noticeable. Again, the unseen one,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
There it is. Wow.
Not noticeable, but always present.
So haunting. Yes, yes.
I do think Pluto has a bit of a haunting quality for sure,
Yeah,
where it's like, yeah,
yeah,
it's definitely kind of always there, but not always in a way that you immediately notice or
yeah,
are aware.
yeah.
Um,
Great.
yeah, should we talk about some of the Pluto cycles? I mean, what I noted here, because Pluto and outer planetary cycles are like, for example, this year we're gonna start to have Pluto-Uranus trine because
Right.
Uranus is going to move into the sign of Gemini, and that's going to start Pluto-Uranus trine. We also have Neptune in the sign of Aries, which is going to form a sextile to Pluto.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's very like now in the moment. I think it's worth maybe talking about a few of these things. Not to go like all like this is not a forecast. We're not like
Right,
gonna
right,
go
right.
into like full prediction mode, but just yeah, I have well, what I can say about like Pluto Uranus transit is that they're extremely powerful.
Yes,
And I have my, I don't know if you watched that documentation with which Richard Tarnas was part of, like the changing of the gods.
I didn't see it.
That was specifically talking about Pluto, Uranus cycles together.
Mm.
And they are linked with a lot of times of social unrest and that's the only word, no, but just uh like a lot of upheaval, because you
Yeah.
have what I told you before, it's like you have this breakthrough breakdown energy of Uranus and like this awakening energy of like, whoa, I want change and liberation. And then you have Pluto that is like intensifying that, like, ooh, like it needs to happen right now, and I don't care if it takes violence to get there. Like that is a lot. That is a
A
lot.
lot.
I will say in sextile, oh no, sorry, in trine, in a trine position, this is actually more beneficial because trines are ruled by Jupiter. So I think it's constructive rather than destructive, even though we can always see both sides. But generally, trine relationships are more constructive and they're focused on like expanding that in a way that is actually useful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel so much of it. Like the word that came to me at the beginning of the year when I was looking at that specifically between the Aquarius Gemini energy. I mean, again, not to forecast it, but the air elemental piece of it just feels so revelatory. Like there's
Oh yeah.
something here that feels like so much about revelation and our awareness and our insight. And I do like the word that I used at the beginning, apocalypsis, right? This sense of uncovering. And that's what I feel from Pluto and Uranus aspects, that they're bringing that apocalypsis, right? But that is often a really intense, grueling process because, like I was talking about, how so much of our reality is built from story, it requires all of the ways that we previously understood reality to break down and be totally like deconstructed and then reconstructed. And that takes years. What I think is so interesting about these relationships is that these are kind of slow moving planets. Like this is years in the making of this kind of like regenerative turning over of the soil and that upheaval that's needed. But man, is it like just hang in there. Like that's what I feel is like we're gonna get through this, but it's gonna look like destruction at face value, you know? And there is like I do feel a kind of genius quality to Uranus in the mix here, where
Mhm.
we need the innovation, we need the insight, we need
Yes.
like revelations of realities that we can't even see yet in our material reality. We need the like eureka moment from Uranus. Like together, I feel they work so well because while Pluto brings the destruction, Uranus is like filling those spaces in with revelation. And so but it's so intense because both of them come like a lightning strike. It feels like a storm, you know? And I love how Kim Kranz talks about the storm, which is that like it sweeps through your life on purpose to disorient everything. But in the wake of the storm, you see everything clearly. You see it for what it really is. And so it's like purposeful disorientation. Um, which, yeah, no, it's never comfortable. But there are certain ways in which I'm like, what's the other option? That we just keep doing things the way that they were? You
I know,
know,
right?
like we all know that that's not it. So it's hard. Either way, it's gonna be hard. You know? Yeah.
Either way, it's gonna be, yeah, I fully agree. I fully agree. And I think it always sounds like exciting when we're talking about like Uranus and we're gonna have a revolution and it's like, well, try being in an actual revolution. I don't
Yeah.
think that's actually a lot of fun because it's completely stabilizing and we've all kind of gotten used to our comfortable lives and it's
Right.
yeah, it's one thing is wanting for things to change, actually being in the part where it's changing is a whole other story and we're just um I'm kind of at the beginning of that, of it actually happening.
Yeah.
But I do also I see a lot of potential in this. I really like that all the outer planets are kind of in a either like a sextile or a trine relationship to one another, because
Mhm.
that means that in generally, despite it probably being hard on us, there is a redeeming quality with all of
Yes.
that. And for me, Uranus in Gemini is very much the portal that's going to open for us to ask the right questions. Because right now we're at this point where we don't have the answers because we haven't yet asked the right questions. And Uranus in Gemini is going to come in and is going to be like, ask the question, open the portal. The question is the portal. And then you can begin to actually, do and excavate. So that's what I'm betting on, partially.
Going for
Yep.
yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's something that I've been thinking about since the beginning of the year is that it's like the sense is that we are obtaining new keys, but we don't yet know what doors they
Yeah.
open. And it's like, okay, you got to go find out. And I wonder about how, yeah, the Neptune sextile plays into it. For me, there's something there about the shattering of our illusions, that is a
Mhm.
necessary part of this process, but it also serves to make it all a lot more unclear because we're going to be questioning what is real. And we already are. Like we already see
Yeah,
that. And so it's
we
like
are.
the three of them coming into this interesting like mini it's like wow, they're really doing work for us to get clear, get right on what is real, which way is up, where are we headed. And it's like whew, that takes a lot of transformation, lots of air and fire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna get a whole lot more crazy and weird and chaotic until it gets
That's it. That's
any
it.
more clear. But
Always.
as you said, right, I feel like it's you're gonna see things more cl like it's almost in the chaos. Where you're like, oh, but not like now I actually, like I've been searching for this book, I don't know, and like now I can find it because everything is chaotic. Like, oh, here it is.
Yep.
That's kind of what I'm getting from all of this. Yeah, and then I can only reiterate one sentence that I have been uttering
Yeah.
the last 2 years. It's equally exciting and terrifying the times that we
Yes,
are in.
exactly. Exactly. Yep. Yep. And, I do sometimes with Pluto. I'm not super into like the evolutionary perspective, but I do take into account that this kind of sentiment that perhaps we were born for this, right? Like I don't pretend to understand the mystery of life and reality, but there's like, okay, well, I am in the story right now. How interesting. You know?
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. No, I
Yeah.
fully agree. It's also, I think that's very Neptune, Saturn in Aries lore.
Mhm. Yes.
Where
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Oh, I'm on this quest. It's a holy quest that I'm on. I'm
Yeah.
here for a reason." Oh, and Jupiter and Leo is just gonna amplify that even more.
Oh God. Yeah, we all better start taking our oaths. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, should we? Is there any? We talked a bit about like
Mm,
Pluto, Mercury. Should we talk briefly about some of the other
sure.
combinations together?
Sure. I mean, yeah, the Pluto Mercury one, the one thing I will say, having that in my chart as a sextile, is that it does bring like such a great mind for research. So don't
Mhm.
underestimate the digging quality of that too, although it does lend to fixation too, which
Oh
is
yeah.
good for research.
Yeah.
But I also, yeah, there's something that I have really experienced, maybe just to say with like Pluto Moon. Pluto moon aspects can be so emotionally regenerative, but equally like that to me is where the subconscious really comes into play, right?
Hmm.
Because Pluto starts to bring it's very much like an up from below kind of energy that I feel, like the shadow magnet, right?
Mm.
And there's a sense that Pluto's bringing things from like the body, from the impressions that are stored in the soma, the memories that aren't just our own, that sometimes are very much ancestral, up to the
Yes.
surface to be healed. And it is like I see it in the relationship with the mother can be really, I mean, I have that signature in my natal chart, so that's kind of a lifelong thing. But in a transit, I feel that the relationship with the mother as a symbol, even not just your literal mother, but like mother as a symbol, that caretaking element can come into play too, where I think about trauma and systems of care, of like how do we really care for ourselves in those fragmented states, or what does recoherence look like? I've just witnessed people moving when Pluto's making an aspect to their natal moon. There's a sense of like really needing to take their healing seriously and having like some real reckonings with what it is that they have held in their body for a long time, right? Because again, that Pluto transit, it's slow to apply. It's slow to separate. It's like, okay, you're in it for a little bit here. You better find a really good like care team, care system so that you are supported through that because there's such a potential for healing. Again, homeopathy, baby. The medicine is in the poison. I'll say it
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
no, 100%. Yeah, when I see like Pluto moon natally, I'm always immediately like, ooh, like what was that environment you grew up in? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
how did that feel? Yeah, yeah, that's definitely there. And I'm not, I'm not just implying that that it's
Right.
bad, but it can be, oftentimes it does point to, specifically like maybe difficult relationship with the mother for various reasons. Or just like like the environment the person was brought up in, like being extremely like intense, and filled with a lot of, yeah, maybe people with addiction, struggling with addiction or mental issues, or like lots of trauma. It doesn't just have to be, right? It could like I don't have that signature specifically in my chart, but I'm just thinking of the fact that, I was brought up in like a spiritual tantric lineage, and I'm like, that's just as much about like confrontation and everything.
Yeah.
And that might be like a positive, that might be like a Pluto moon trine or something like that, where it's where
That's a
it's like
good
actually
point.
like a positive influence on your life. I don't have that natally, but I'm just
Yeah.
want to bring an example that is maybe more pleasant to people, because again, it's not just doom and gloom if you have Pluto
Yeah.
in any aspect with your natal planets. I think yeah, that's good for the moon, unless you want to add anything more.
Oh, that's great. It's a good point.
We
Yeah.
can yeah, okay, maybe we can talk about Pluto Venus because that's also an interesting one, I guess, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, because it's definitely that, parts where worst case, it's like an addiction to romantic relationships, or feeling like like a loveaholic, or
Yeah.
however it's called,
Sure. Yeah.
sexholic,
Mhm.
type of
Yeah.
transits, where you're like constantly seeking that hit of like, or like, because having a crush is intense energy.
That's so real.
And yeah, and like learning to use that is you can, in a constructive way, you can learn to use that in a way that it fuels your creativity
Yes.
in life, but in a rather destructive way, it's really just this like, oh, like this person is like gonna
Mm,
give me this, and like I have to be utterly obsessed about this, otherwise it's not gonna happen. And I'm sorry, I'm saying this like in a theatrical voice, like I've definitely been there myself, so I'm like not trying to make fun of anybody in
yeah.
these situations. It's very real. It's very
Yeah.
real, and it can be very detrimental when you feel like when a person becomes the point of your obsession, and you feel like that's like your only solace is gonna happen once
Oh,
you get them, but it's not, and then it doesn't happen, and it's, yeah.
Yep. Well, yeah, and it, the kind of cultural conditioning doesn't help. That this is
Does.
like what we see in every movie is to me like a really imbalanced Venus Pluto energy of that obsession. But, if I had to give, I've thought about this a lot over the years because one time I worried, I'm like, with my Venus Pluto square, will I ever truly get to rest in relationship, And what I've learned is that it's like relationship becomes a crucible, right? Like so much transformation and it's like you enter it feels almost like what people describe like the twin flame as or something like this, but really you're just entering in and there's an alchemy that occurs. There is this regenerative, like both people are ideally liberated through that experience and see
Yes.
themselves more clearly. It reminds me of temperance a little bit, like
Hmm.
this kind of merging of duality and union, right? It feels extremely alchemical in that way. And because most of us don't have maps for how to navigate that skillfully, it can also become obsessive, jealous,
Yes.
compulsive. The control piece with Venus and Pluto is very intense. It is very intense. And I think that I notice people use sex for control a lot in those scenarios or yeah, I think mentioning the sex piece is worthwhile there because so much of our culture sex equates to power and
Mhm.
so you have to consider how much that is wielded relationally to have power over. So there's so much there, and I think people moving through Venus Pluto aspect, like transits, there is something to be said for how relationships likely become a crucible. And it's like love is not the force that is trying to make you feel comfortable. Love is the force that's trying to evolve you. Like real love is extremely transformative. So buckle up, you know? Yeah.
Buckle. Yeah, it's I think one of the things that people gotta tread lightly if it's like
Mm,
in a natal signature or happening transit wise is to like not trauma bond with
totally.
people, which I would say it's not like the worst thing ever.
Right.
Like if both people work with it, but I've seen it more than enough times where it's just a trauma bond and it's after
Yeah.
transformation happens, you're like, what the heck was that even?
Right. Right.
Um, so that is just something I think to keep in mind. But it doesn't, again, I like that you said that it certainly doesn't have to be something that dooms you for life or that like every single relationship is. But at the end, I'm like, well, isn't it beautiful if every relationship, if you have three relationships in your life is deeply transformative? Like, isn't that what you want?
That's what you signed up for, baby. Yeah. That's it. That's it.
Exactly. So, yeah, you would rather be transformed by a lover than somebody else at the end of the day. So
Oh,
don't hate on Venus Pluto stuff.
it's great
Um,
for romantics.
and great for passionate romantic.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then well, okay, the sex piece I think is definitely also very applicable to Mars,
Yeah.
Pluto.
Yes.
Maybe even more to some extent because it's like Mars. I mean, Mars Pluto is the quintessential like you have to be very careful that it doesn't break into an extremely violent line because it can like Mars Pluto together is no joke.
Yeah.
Especially when they're like in an opposition or a square.
Hmm.
This is definitely the part where like the purging can feel forced or
Woo.
like necessary.
Yeah.
I think at least that's how I've experienced it in my life sometimes when it happened transit wise. Like I distinctly remember that last Mars retrograde that we had in like Cancer Leo and that that 29 I think or 28 was it like degrees of like Pluto in Capricorn and Mars in Cancer like that was quite
That was
intense.
so gnarly.
That
Yeah.
was definitely gnarly and then the other two ones happened with yeah, like Mars in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. I'm not saying it's better, but I do think that 29 degrees is just oof.
Oh my God. Ridiculous.
And
Ridiculous.
that is, yeah, that can be quite violent energy. And again, it can also be constructive. That's the line here, you know. It's like, are you
Always.
going into destruction or are you going into creation? It can be extremely poignant and regenerative, but it
Yeah.
can also be extremely, extremely destructive.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. And I think I don't like to sugarcoat things. Like
Oh yeah.
Pluto Mars, it's so intense. Like I remember during that transit, a dear friend of mine had like a super extreme, I don't want to say what it was, but it was like an extreme experience that was very Mars disaster coded, but it also then was the impetus for her to like change her life in a way that's been really good for her in the long run, right? But it's like those are the moments I feel really everything we've talked about with like addiction and destructive energies and repression and all of this is especially important for the Mars Pluto aspects because that's where you really see it. And the power dynamic element there where we could I mean I see it in like manipulation tactics and how we seek to have power over or control over, right? Which unfortunately is also so much of the kind of conditioning or the structures of our world are very actually rooted in, to me, like an imbalanced Mars-Pluto energy.
Oh yeah.
So, it becomes very dangerous very quickly. And if you're moving with it in a way where you know how to purge and move those energies like you were speaking to, it's actually really transformative and
Oh
can
yeah.
lead to that kind of death process for renewal. But this is one of those aspects where I'm like, you got to consider worst case scenario. Like this is definitely like worth noting that it's gnarly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they also don't happen so often, right? Because Mars takes around 2 years to like get to its
Yeah.
place it was. So
Yeah.
it's when that opposition or that square moment happen, it's definitely felt like
It's
Mar
acute.
Pluto, Venus, Pluto, Mercury. It's
Mhm.
happens a lot more quickly.
Right. And I do see like the accident prone energy come in with Mars where there's these like acute moments of like, oh shit, it really is kind of upheaval or this kind of fragmented, not disaster, but it can move in that way where it's very quick and unexpected. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
shattered
Like,
vase.
throw like Uranus in that mix. It's
Oh no. No, no,
you
no
just
thanks.
have you just have that like unexpected volcano erupture out of nowhere.
I'd like to opt out of that one.
No. Um, yeah, we have what did we know? Okay, well, Pluto Jupiter, which also really doesn't happen a
Mm-mm.
lot. I mean, currently they're like in averse signs to one another. Like Pluto is in Aquarius and Jupiter is in Cancer, so they're not really making any aspect to one another. But we're gonna get this summer. We're gonna get a Jupiter Pluto opposition, which I think is gonna be quite life changing. I think the what Pluto and Jupiter have in common is that, like, make small things big type of thing.
It's so
And
real.
I'm just like, that's a transit I am having my eyes out on. I'm so curious about that one. I never, like, of course, there's always like we have our notions as astrologers, but I always come from it from a place of like pure curiosity where I don't know exactly what's gonna happen, but I want to find out.
Yes, totally. Yeah, especially in Aquarius, Leo feels whew, potent.
It feels
Yeah.
potent. I'm like and with the nodes
Yeah.
shifting signs as well. I'm like
That
there's
eclipse
just gonna
season in August is going to be a wild ride. Yeah.
guys, it's not gonna be the most fun Leo season. I'm sorry.
No, it's not Brat Girl Summer, I don't think. Brat Summer, I don't even know what it really is.
It's a transformative summer,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
illuminating summer with that eclipse we're getting in Leo. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot. I think especially, yeah, it's gonna really hit our egos hard,
yeah.
or also expand them so much where
Both at
it's
the same
like,
time, I think. Yeah, yeah, I feel like it's going to be the mirror shattering. And also, I just feel like a rapidness of growth there. Like to me,
Yes.
Pluto and Jupiter together feel like it's like, no, no, it's now. Like we're moving, we're changing. It's
Yeah.
now. It's now or never, baby. Yeah.
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 Oh, and with that trying to like Neptune, Saturn. Oh, I can fully see that. I think Saturn might be the most benevolent force in this installation.
Yeah, I think honestly, I'm kind of grateful that there's some conflict there. Yeah. Imagine with no Saturn. No.
Yes. Yes, but I mean, I certainly think Jupiter Pluto has the more regenerative quality
Yeah.
because Jupiter is just so extremely regenerative. Where it definitely the transformation between both of them is a more like you really feel like, oh yeah, I expanded and like that was necessary. Like I feel more faithful now in myself or
Yeah.
humanity.
Feels very Six of Wands to me. Like they're
Mm.
like able to really yes, like see growth for the sake of growth, that it was a good thing, you know? Yeah.
Yes, and then wait, do you have something to say about like Sun Pluto? Because we haven't talked about the Sun Pluto yet. That's
So, I
that
mean,
happens once a year.
yeah.
Um, well, each of the right, the Sun Pluto conjunction, opposition, square, trine, sextile happens once a year. Um, yeah, it's actually I'm thinking about it now, and I'm like, it's something I do not come across in charts so much, to be completely honest.
Mhm.
It's not something that seems to be something that is very much a part of my life. I'm sure there are astrologers out there that I constantly see Sun Pluto. I'm like,
Right.
I actually don't really see that so often.
Right. Yeah, I don't either. I think I have a close friend who has a Sun Pluto sextile, and there's a sense of like that in a beautiful way, this creates like what I notice is like a flexibility or a mutability of their ego, of their
Mm,
self-concept that is very able to like go through multiple death and rebirth processes, and they're like so okay with it. They're like, yeah,
mm.
I'm not who I was anymore. It's fine. I'm like this, and I feel very inspired by it, honestly. And I think that's a more harmonious aspect. I wonder about like a square can be kind of like an ego dissolution in an uncomfortable way, but I kind of want to pay attention to that this year, like what Sun Pluto things are happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with Jupiter in the mix, it's yeah.
Yeah.
But let's not forget that Pluto is apparently exalted in Leo. So
I mean, yeah, apparently.
yeah, apparently. Yeah, and then we have, I mean, unless you want to say anything else about Pluto Sun, but we also have Pluto Saturn, which
Mm,
is something.
it is something.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's certainly, both of them are slower moving. I mean, Saturn from all these seven inner planets is the most slow moving, takes like 2.5 years. And well, we're also getting a sextile from like Pluto to. We literally just had that actually.
Yeah.
As a matter of
Yes.
fact, we literally just had a Saturn Pluto sextile over the weekend.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. Yes. Yeah. And I don't know, I have a Pluto Saturn trine in my chart, and I feel that it actually really creates a level of discipline, but also a capacity to stay with the intensity. That's what I
mm,
noticed is like this sense of like, nope, we're gonna stay with it, we're gonna hold it down. This too shall pass. That's
mm.
what my mom said to me growing up, and I'm like, she had that right. This too shall pass. And it was this sense of like, just stay in there, hang in there, and let the intensity like do its work on you, and then you'll come out on the other side and it'll be okay. I just feel that Saturn can really help to stabilize the transformation that's occurring. And like I can see on the flip side where this could be a signal of maybe some struggle psychologically with like the intensity, but I've experienced it to be quite stabilizing. Yeah.
I agree. I like them together. because also throughout the conversation, there seems to be a lot of like similarities
Mhm.
between both of them. I think where they like kind of move apart a bit is just that Saturn is more about like time as a concept and like things taking
Right.
time and like long term and everything. And Pluto is very much like if it gets obsessed with something, it's like now we need to do
Now.
it now. Even though Pluto is like so much slower moving than Saturn, but okay.
Right. Right. Well,
But
I
but
love
I
that it's a father-son combo too. It's kind of cute.
yes, I certainly think that yeah, what you said, I like that Pluto, sorry, that Saturn can kind of help stabilize Pluto, but I have also I think it's something that people have observed a
Mm.
lot of times that this can be like in initiation. I mean, that's not, but like the initial cause for like wars actually when Saturn and Pluto
Yeah.
come together.
Right. That makes sense.
Yes, yes, because we as soon as we like enter Saturn and the other outers, it becomes a lot more collective, and because they're slower moving planets, it doesn't happen all the time, and people have noticed that signature. It's yeah,
Yeah, that
around
makes
like wars,
the
wars.
structural change too
Yes,
feels really big there. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, we're in it now, so
we're in it now.
we're in it now.
Okay, guys, we took a small, tiny break again, and now we're gonna get to the last part of this bit. We're gonna talk about Pluto and medical astrology because we always have that segment. Would feel weird leaving it out. And then we're gonna talk a bit about how to build a relationship to Pluto or Hades, and then gonna let the Orphic hymn to Pluto, or again, well, Hades be recited.
Love it.
So, yes, Pluto in medical astrology is, yeah, okay, it's tied to psychological intensity, which can translate to mental health issues, like for obvious reasons, like basically everything we kind of like were talking about before, right? It's like, um, yeah, and I have it written down here as well, like it can really go into the realms of like OCD, like which are very like obsessive behaviors or I think a lot of just trauma in general, I think was is tied with Pluto. But it can bring forth I mean, it can I don't want to sit here and be like, "Oh, Pluto causes you to have PTSD." Like that's no. Planets are descriptive rather than prescriptive. They're going to describe you having PTSD. They're not going to cause it per se. But sometimes Pluto transits can come into our lives and again, it's that example of like the vase shattering and that's the event. The PTSD is everything that comes afterwards, and the coping mechanisms are not. And that can certainly be a Pluto transit. Yes, Pluto is also other than Mars, but also connected to surgeries, which is like a, also a purification process, if you will. So, to detoxification, purging, letting things go in a very literal sense in the body. Yes. What else do I have here? Again, rules, tissues, and cell death and medical astrology. Tumors and malignancies have been linked to Pluto along with viral infections. And yes, the rest I said. Ba, 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 ba. Often people with strong Pluto placements who are at the receiving end of the darker side of its energy have extraordinary powers of regeneration. Yeah.
Yeah, to summate the the episode that. Yeah, I also will say like I feel I used to be just like full-time Ayurvedic practitioner and I feel a lot of what I learned through that work is just how much of illness and disease can really have a psychological root, right? And I think that we see this more now, but I associate Pluto with psychosomatic causes of disease or imbalance where we're actually giving something so much energy at a mind level that it is impacting at a cellular level the health of the body, you know? And for me that's so much of why like the emotional processing or the purging and catharsis is like actually a really healing quality for Pluto.
Hmm.
Able to let that process do what it's naturally meant to. And Pluto has reminded me more than most other planets just how much the body is a kind of earth. Going back to like this sense that Hades' body is the land itself, like our bodies do function in that way too. And death and decay is part of that landscape, of course. But um, yeah, there's something that feels almost like at a spirit level or this psychosomatic element that like our cellular intelligence functions like an ecosystem and it's impacted by our emotions just as much as everything else. So um, yeah, super, super powerful. And that like there's people that have healed their own imbalances just by speaking kindly to themselves. And that's like a real thing. So for me, that's like evidence of how we can heal with Pluto. Yeah, be kind
Yes.
to yourself. Yeah.
Get obsessed with super kind thoughts to your
There you
body.
go. Cast that spell. Why don't you? Yeah. I love it.
I agree. I would, I guess when it comes to like Pluto and health stuff, I would look out for that in your chart if Pluto is aspecting your moon in any type of way, because the moon is the body, the quintessential body that can have an impact. If Pluto is transiting through your sixth house, or your 12th house, maybe going to be more physical or more mental. I would throw the eighth house in there as well to some extent for sure. Or if it's, yeah, if it's aspecting the ruler of your sixth house in any sort of way, or like the ruler of your 12th house, that's what I would watch out for. Pluto impacting your health, because not all Pluto transits are going to be about your health, but they certainly like can be, and that's what I would look out for. Maybe also throw the sun in there when it comes to like your vitality as well. Like that can certainly also, but yeah, it really depends what the ruler of your like sixth house is and what it's doing.
Yeah,
Pluto
totally.
is aspecting it in any way.
Yeah, and I feel it's like also at times when Pluto's transiting your natal Saturn, there can be like those chronic imbalances that have accumulated over many years that start to also like make themselves known, where it's like, oh yeah, I need to take better care of this part of my body. Um, yeah, always to help us grow, I believe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything more to add to any of that?
Let's see. Hmm. I don't think
Not
so. I think there's a
not that
part of me
it's
that,
necessary.
yeah, no, just like the part of me that wants to maybe myth bust that Pluto moving through your eighth house does not mean that you're gonna die. Like,
Oh,
not
yeah.
all Cancer risings are gonna die this year, y'all. It's like, no, that's not how it works. That science, I mean, just I hear that so often. Like sometimes folks come to me because they read something on the internet about how like their Pluto being in this spot means they're gonna die at this time, and it's like it's such a complex. We can't take it so face value that Pluto is death, right? Like, yes, there are ways to see it, but it's not as simple as just where Pluto is. It's a whole ecosystem. Yeah, yeah.
I agree. If
Uh,
anything, we should both be equally afraid with Pluto transiting our fourth house, which is
Ooh,
also linked to death,
so
and
much.
I'm not afraid of that. So
I'm not afraid to die.
I'm not afraid of that. No, but honestly, like fourth, eighth, 12th house, it's like the whole trine aspect thing going on. There is oftentimes it doesn't have to be literal death. It can be just the what would like the oh my gosh, I only have this word in German
Like
right now in my
symbolic,
head. Yeah,
metaphor.
like symbolic, but just like the I have to translate that right now. It's not gonna leave me alone. It's like a super simple word.
Yep.
I guess excavation could kind of fit in here. Uh, what is that in English? Confrontation.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
totally.
the confrontation around death, which
Yes.
yeah, it can just be, it can just suddenly be like the urge of like Pluto transiting your eighth house could be the urge of suddenly wanting to become a death doula and
Right.
be with
Definitely.
people who are in their passing stages. Like that can equally
That's
be Pluto in your
beautiful.
eighth house. It doesn't have to be you dying at all.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm,
important mention, or if Pluto is transiting your Saturn, it's like no.
no.
No, no. And again, I wanna what I do want to mention here though is that the point before like Pluto, astrological transits being descriptive rather than prescriptive, it's like, of course, that comes from somewhere. It can be that, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to. If it happens, it can describe that though. But it's
Yeah.
like, it's really not going to happen for everyone at all. At all.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
most of the times, we're not living out the best case nor the worst case scenarios of transits. It's somewhere in the middle.
Well said. Yes. Love that. Somewhere in the middle. How boring, huh?
Exactly,
We
exactly.
want the drama.
I know, right? I'm
Uh,
usually like, if something dramatic is happening in your chart, it's like there's probably multiple timing techniques pointing to
yeah.
it, not just transits. Not just, it's never just transits. Like there's multiple timing techniques being like, this is something super poignant. So, um, yep,
I love
that's
that.
what I have to say here. Let's talk now a bit more about like how to build a relationship with Pluto. Or with
Mhm.
Hades, which I think you can talk more about because you were literally telling me before how you were building your relationship to Hades over the past few weeks. And I think it's interesting because when I was talking about like Neptune and Uranus, I was really in this mood of like, well, I do think it's similar to Pluto, but I do think it's also different. Where I think it's harder to build a relationship to the outer planets because usually they start building a relationship to us first before we with them, which I think is very different than the inner planets. Like the inner planets are very much like reciprocal, and it's like really you being able to like do something about it. But the outer planets, because they are so slow moving and they do these like once in a lifetime transits in our charts, they usually like come to us before we come to them. And Pluto, again, it's a force, the unseen force that is always here but not feasible. So
Mm,
but I would say, yeah, there is, I never in my life did I ever build an altar for Uranus or Neptune.
yeah.
But with Hades, it for some reason feels different. I don't know
hmm
why. I don't know
hmm
why. Maybe you can tell me why it feels so different.
hmm Well, I make a case for this. Again, like Hades is not just the underworld. Hades, I mean, as a ritualist, as an earth-loving girly, like Hades is the land, right? Like it is so much about, like for me, my relationship with Pluto or Hades has not looked much differently than my relationship with just like land-based spirituality or practices, right? And like really relating to the earthly world as this animate landscape that is like matter infused with spirit and spirit infused with matter and really recognizing this kind of like yeah, it's animism, right? And I very much identify as an animist. So it's really helped me to transform my relationship, like building connection with them is it invites us into connection with the land directly as them, as an emanation of them, in my experience. And especially Pluto being associated with wealth and an agricultural sense, like the richness of the soil and the mineral kingdom, the mycelium, this is the realm of Pluto. It's the crust of the earth, right? And yeah, so much of the it does get kind of intense at times. Like you really do have to keep things moving. You have to keep turning over the soil so things don't sediment and stagnate in your own inner world. But I feel that there is this ease, or again, the patience that we spoke about with Hades/Pluto, where it's the sense that you're relating to what is. You're relating to the reality of life and death as one, the reality of your precious human existence. And I have never experienced it to be commanding or unnecessarily confronting. I've actually experienced it to be incredibly gentle, where it's like, yes, child, you're in this body and you're aging every day. How precious the gift of this life. Like it feels very Mary Oliver. What will you do with this one precious life? It
Mm.
really does bring you into the intimacy with death, which is intimacy with life, and almost inhabiting that space between as the truth. So I love it. I think it is very generative. It is very much about like the fertility of that relationship. Um, and it's interesting because even in like the Odyssey, when Odysseus goes to practice necromancy and communicate with the dead, there is some instruction that we get from the Odyssey about how to connect with Hades, which is like digging a trench in the ground. Do you know this part of the myth where it's like you dig a trench in the ground the size of your elbow to your hand, so you like dig a trench and you fill it with like milk and honey and blood or wine and barley, right? These life-giving, actually incredibly nourishing offerings. Because
Mhm.
you're feeding the body of the land the same as you would feed your own body, the same as you would feed Hades' body. Like it's all for me very much about like the reality of this material existence. So yeah, I think for me, building a relationship with Pluto or Hades is like connecting with the soil, connecting with the mud and the being like the vultures that are like so generously eating the stuff that nobody wants to deal with. I feel vultures are messengers of Hades in my opinion, but I'm surrounded by them. But they've been circling overhead this whole time, I will say. So yeah, that's where I come from with it. Is like you're relating to what is. It's like the most present you can be with life in some ways. Yeah, yeah.
I
Mm.
love that. Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, I feel like in a way, what James Hillman says in the book, but
Yes.
the fact that in like a lot of like Hades didn't even really have an altar, right? It was not, you didn't really go to the god to give offerings per se. Like that's not really what Hades was for.
Right.
Um and because Hades itself is a unseen presence, not really here but always felt,
Yeah.
I think that is what invites us to also be in the present moment. Like I feel like you said that very beautifully for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think what was I gonna say there? It's so interesting, it just escaped me. He's like, nope. Uh, yeah, it's gone.
Can't go there. Well, if anything, you can, if you want to do some like Hades magic, is I
Mm.
think there's a lot of like power magic that is involved in all of that, where it's and I think I would put glamour magic in a weird way. I would put that here too, which certainly there's like a layer of Venus, but again, Venus and Pluto
Yeah.
do share some sort of a love story. But it's, what you do with glamour magic oftentimes is the fact that you decide who sees what and
Yeah.
how. Like you conceal and reveal yourself, which is
Love that.
extremely Hades, actually.
Love that so much. And yeah, that is, I remembered what I was gonna say too, is that like, in in ancient times, oftentimes it was like you weren't making offerings to Hades unless a loved one had died, right? Because he
Mm.
he ruled over funerary rites. And so there was this association that you only called upon Hades when someone had died. So why would you call upon him if someone hadn't died? There's a little bit of that kind of like fear around it, but I think in modern times, because the frequency of death is much less intense, well, not necessarily these days, but there's a sense that I have where developing a relationship with Hades now is less so about just the death rites and the funerary rites, but also I just feel this in my work with like ancestral healing is almost like, I'm gonna say this bluntly, like cleaning up the mess that our forebears did not really tend to.
Mm.
Just to be totally honest, like we inherited a world with a lot of unprocessed death and lineage-based density. And I feel that there's even more of a reason these days, with such like massive death occurring on Earth right now, to actually work with that energy in a way that's like, may we help this to move? May we help this to metabolize in a way where it doesn't get stuck in our bodies and stuck in the land, because our bodies are the land, and the land is our body. And so there is this way that we can invite Hades, I feel, to help us keep moving what otherwise might get stuck in that. Yeah, it's super tender, actually. Like, I feel the compassion of Pluto in this. And like that Pluto knows how to take that compost and make it a field of flowers. It really is like that. And even some of these, like that, right from Odysseus, that's a fertility rite in some ways too. Like you're literally carving into the land and filling it with milk and honey. It's very like um generative, the offering. So it's almost like an ode to that may there be nourishment where there once has been decay, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
I love
And
that.
like,
That's
yeah.
oh,
It
sorry, did you want to end
Well,
say something?
I will say it's probably worth a warning that like it can get intense. So don't get stuck in the underworld, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, as long as you're still in the flesh body, which is a living body, don't get stuck into the underworld because you're gonna spend more time in the underworld anyways.
Yeah, that's so true. Be Persephone that comes up for half the year, literally, you know? That's why she does that, I believe. You can't stay down there all the time. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's I think with this we can, unless you want to say anything else, but transition to the final part where we're gonna recite the Orphic hymn.
Mm-hmm.
You said you chose a bit of an abbreviation of
Mm.
it, right? Well, you
No,
said
just
to
a different
Pluto, right?
translation.
Hmm?
Yeah, yeah, it is to Pluton. Yeah.
Because there is also an Orphic hymn to Hades. Just throwing that out there. But I think that's also a good way to like connect to that. Again, like maybe don't use overuse that every day.
Yeah,
But
totally.
it's definitely something to intentionally connect. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many different translations you can find too. Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, to Pluton. You dwell below the earth, O strong-spirited one, a meadow in Tartaros, thick-shaded and dark. Sceptered, tonic Zeus, please accept this sacrifice, O Pluton, holder of the keys to the whole earth. To mankind you give the wealth of the year's fruits. Yours is the third portion, earth, queen of all, seat of the gods, mighty lap of mortals. Your throne rests on a dark realm, the realm of distant, of untiring, of windless, and of impassive Hades. It does not rest on gloomy Acheron, the river who girds the roots of the earth. All receiver, master of death, master of mortals, host of many, Eubulos, you once took your bride, pure Demeter's daughter. You tore her away from the meadow, and through the sea you carried her to an Attic cave upon your steeds. It was the district of Eleusis, where the gates to Hades are. You alone were born to judge deeds obscure and conspicuous, holiest and illustrious ruler of all, frenzied God, you delight in the respect and in the reverence of your worshippers. I summon you. Come with favor, come with joy to the initiates. Mm.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this Pluto episode with me.
Ooh.
Um, I'm gonna, if you have any other concluding words, please feel free to bring them.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'm gonna let you shout out feels such a weird way to say it now. Um, maybe you can whisper it in a conspicuous way.
Ooh.
Your where can people find you if you want to be found?
I love that so much. If you want to be found. Yeah, no, I'm so grateful. Actually just so grateful for the opportunity to muse about this sometimes exiled one, feels like a kind of reclamation. Um, and yeah, you can find me. My practice is the altar. And so you can find me on Instagram at Altar Ritual West. And I have a Substack called The Altar of Stars, where I do weekly astrology things and talk a lot about ancestor work and tending to the dead. So some Hades coded work happening over there for sure. But yeah, thank you so much. It was such an honor. This was such a gift. Yeah. Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I'm so glad I could like conclude this with you, even though again there might be like a Chiron episode as well and some other things. But that's like, that's a different realm of asteroids and all of that. So yeah, it was really lovely. I really, I feel like we both did, right now actually, you know what? I just realized I never said which day we're recording this, which is so funny. And I never missed it until now, but I'm gonna say it now.
Yes.
We're recording this on March 31st. And well, now it's here in Central European time, it's almost 8 p.m., but we started at around 4 p.m. So as you can see, guys, these episodes are freaking long with all the breaks and everything. Um, but yeah, that's a bit hilarious that I totally forgot that. Um, but my point was that we're recording this under the brim of, that Libra full moon that is about to happen, and it's Venus, the ruler of that moon, is about to also form a square to Pluto. So it does feel very aligned to do this right now.
Mhm.
Yes, and it's probably gonna get released on May 1st. I think that's the proposition I had, which is yeah, kind of also linked to Pluto.
Mhm. Yes. The
So
ultimate.
yeah, anyhow, if you've came so far, thank you so much for joining and coming along with the Meet the Planet series. It has been such a joy doing this and talking to everyone about like it's like I couldn't imagine doing something better in my life. Like seriously, like
So good.
it's my favorite thing is talking about the planets and yeah, if you found this useful, feel free to share this episode. This is available on YouTube and on Spotify, so wherever you're listening, you can head to the latter. And there's so many other fun things that are going to come up. You can everything that has to do with me, you can find under Resonance Astrology. I also have, weekly overviews on YouTube and other fun videos, and on Instagram, I usually like condense it all into a carousel post. So there's always something to talk about with astrology. It never gets boring, truly. Yeah. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot any of us a DM or a mail or anything, or write us a comment talking about your natal Pluto or your natal Pluto transits. Would love to hear about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We're going to leave you with that. And yeah, we're going to talk to each other soon. Bye.